Welcome to the Lorehounds, your guides to the deadlights of Derry. I'm Elysia, the red balloon bearer, and I am joined again by Mark, the keeper of the secrets of Maturin. Stay tuned for Turtle Talk lore later. Mark, welcome.
Thanks. I'm just glad you didn't call me Mark Leucochloridium Popany. That would have been more insulting. I'm happy to be the keeper of the secrets.
Your last name could be a scientific species.
Could be. How do we know it's not? Hey, my brother's a scientist. You never know. All right. Happy to be here, though.
So I'm afraid John couldn't join us again this week. Probably he'll be back next. We will be looking for him in the tunnels underneath the well house. But we are here today to discuss It, Welcome to Derry, Season 1, Episode 4, The Great Swirling Apparatus of Our Planet's Function, which in my estimation is an excellent title. This one was directed again by Andrew Bernstein, who also directed Episode 3. And the writer this time was Helen Shang, who's done lots of past work, but might be of interest to this audience that she's written episodes for Rings of Power and Invincible. And spoilers begin now. So we are going to open up all the spoilers for, we're going to try not to spoil anything from the book that might, I mean, it's difficult to do that, right? Like, how can we actually spoil that? Because everything was already spoiled in the movies, which we are allowed to talk about.
We're trying not to spoil things that we think are going to happen in this season or next season based on the book, except for the stuff that's spoiled by the opening credits, right?
Well, and the movies.
You know, and it's because they do talk about some of those things, you know, we know some of the highlights, but yeah. Right.
So, for example, we will, like I have in the notes, we can talk about a place that's called the Black Spot. We won't talk about what we know happens in the future of this location. Right. Anyway. But before we actually get into the new episode, we put out a call we had questions about the Barons, and we have gotten answers. We've gotten 2 answers. Do you want to read what Chumbaruni wrote to us about the Barons?
Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've participated, but I was listening to this pod episode today, and I wanted to give my 2 cents as a New Hampshire native. Not sure if anybody answered your question yet. The Barrens, being referred to by Stephen King, are probably based on randomly found barren lands all throughout the New England region, which are named that because they look barren and have bad soil and rely on periodic fires to help control the growth and to help make the soil better over time. There are a number of barrens all throughout New England, some of the more prominent ones being Miles Standish State Forest and Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, Ossipee Pine Barrens in New Hampshire, and the 2 most prominent in Maine, which King probably pulled from, are the Kennebunk Plains and the Waterboro Barrens Preserve. Not sure which one he would be referring to, if either one specifically, because they are both about the same distance away from Bangor, about 3 hours, which is where I believe King bases Derry off.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add to that before we respond, we also got from Jim N. The Barons and the Standpipe. When I first read it, I remember struggling with what a standpipe looked like. I also did not have a clear picture of the Barons. Finally, a few years ago, I got to go to Bangor and do the SK tours. They take you around Bangor on a bus and show you all the landmarks in Stephen King's books that are in Bangor. There is the giant Paul Bunyan statue, Bev's house, the drain where George is taken, and of course, the Standpipe and the Barons. The Barons is a small stream that winds through the middle of Bangor and empties into the Penobscot River. On both sides, there are some wooded areas. That's the Barons, a great place for kids to go and get away from adults, but still be right in the middle of town. So, yeah, thank you, Jim and Chumbaruni. We've got one, someone who's actually done the Stephen King tour and a local of New England. And yeah, so what Chumbaruni describes as the Barons is what I would expect based on the name, right? What Jim describes is what we see in the movies. Do you have thoughts?
My thoughts are that I have been to one. I have been to Miles Standish State Forest. It is on the way to the Cape. And so one time, because I am a non-native New Englander now, and on the way back, we were like, let's go on a hike with the kids. And it didn't feel barren, though. It felt like a forest, right? So if it's about the soil composition and all that, that's the kind of thing that would just be not within, I wouldn't be noticing that, just like pulling off the road for an hour. But yeah, no, this is stuff I wish I knew when I was reading these books. Like the standpipe is another thing. Like it's this water tower, but I didn't perceive that reading this novel. Again, I read this novel for the first time when I was like 13. So, or something like that. And I didn't see the,
and you were not
the
yet in
miniseries
New
until
England
later.
then, right?
No, I was in San Diego at that point, which is
right.
everything's barren in a different way, though. Different kind of barren, right? Just semi-desert there. Yeah, no, thanks so much. This is fascinating stuff. We got to get the New Englander input whenever possible.
Right. Especially in Stephen King stuff.
The Mainers, please write in. Are whoopie pies good? Do people like whoopie pies? Because it's a controversial discussion in my family whether the state dessert is worth eating.
Wait, so okay, I think I've had whoopie pies. Is it like cookies with like a marshmallowy filling?
It's sort of like a chocolate cookie, but more like cake, almost like a cookie-shaped chocolate cake, 2 pieces of it with kind of like either whipped cream or like maybe like cake icing in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not really anything more complicated than that, I don't think.
Okay, then it is what I think it is, and my verdict is yes, good.
It's cake. It's cake with frosting. Also, Moxie. I was just in Maine and I tried to find Moxie to try.
What is Moxie?
Moxie is like the state soda. It is a locally famous soft drink, and it apparently is spicy. In the same way that root beer or Dr. Pepper is like spicy, kind of like not spicy, but
right, herbaceous,
complex in the yes. It's like that apparently, but I couldn't find it, and I tried. And we were just in Maine over the summer. We went to the national park there, and I failed. Bar Harbor let me down. Maybe we did go to Bangor, but I did not go to any convenience stores in Bangor. So anyways, write in. I don't think it's going to come up in this. Interestingly enough, there is a soda mentioned in this series a few times called Fizzola.
Okay.
But that is not the soda that Stephen King, like Stephen King doesn't talk about Moxie. Stephen King talks about Nozzle in a lot of his stories. And it's not like a thing, but it's like kind of one of those running brand names throughout his continuity. And they didn't use that, which makes me think like, what do they obviously, the names are so close. They obviously knew about Nozzle. Is it like one of them is the Sprite and the other is the Coke? Like, are we supposed to interpret this as meaningful? Because the fact that they didn't use the name, but they used something so similar, it's not like they don't have the rights to the Stephen King invented soda brand Nozzle. I don't know. This is what the people come for, right? This conversation.
Fizzola sounds more appetizing than Nozzle.
Yeah, and I might be mispronouncing the thing that I've only seen in writing ever.
Or whatever it is. Fizzola sounds nicer. So
someone's going to write in and be like, no, actually there's a soda in Bangor, Maine only that is called Fizzola, and it's a spinoff of Moxie. But yeah.
Well, I'm learning lots of things about Maine soda now. Real and fictional.
Non-native New Englander here, right? So learning as I go.
Well, we do have some lore questions that I know that you know more about the entity itself. We're going to save them until the end. There's been lots of chatter on the Discord and questions about this stuff, so I thought it's a good time to address it all.
Sure.
But let's open with our mid-season hot takes. Premise for this episode is, as the kids face increasingly terrifying experiences, Charlotte attempts to advocate for Hank, and General Shaw escalates his efforts. So what did you think about episode 4 overall?
Can I just say that I have a lot of thoughts, but my main hot takes have been erased because I only 20 minutes ago finished watching The Long Walk, and which is available on demand to everybody now. And I started watching it yesterday and ran out of time. And folks, we have 6 or 7 hours between us in time zones. So we're recording quite early in the morning, and I woke up early, got cereal. I was like, I have to finish this movie. So my brain is kind of shaken, frankly, by that. So I have to pivot back into...
Can we just, while your brain's in that space, curious, what are your hot takes, spoiler-free, obviously, for this podcast on The Long Walk? And not that you can spoil that one either.
Did people talk about that? Did you do an episode with it? Because I just watched it. I haven't even looked up.
I have not done an episode
You
about
have
it,
not.
but I have been advocating for it. It's in my top 10 movies of the year.
I really liked it.
Mhm.
It's very, again, not what the people are here to listen to, but
Yeah. It's Stephen King.
it was very disturbing in this, just because, based on the premise of it, that people will fail and die, right? And it's baked in, and they do an excellent job of making you understand these characters through very limited interactions with some of them, and love these characters through. I really liked it. Like I literally just finished it 20 or 30 minutes ago, so I haven't necessarily thought super critically about it, but I enjoyed it. It's interesting to think about in the context of Stephen King, and knowing that it was a pseudonymous. This is a Richard Bachman book when he was trying to not feel like he had to write horror, but it's so horrific and dystopian in some ways. But does it fit in with this universe? Probably
it's
not.
It's not supernatural, but yeah,
it's not, right? But yeah, I found it very gripping and really heartwarming at times, and funny at a few times, and terrifying at other times, and well made. I feel like I don't remember the director's name, but gosh, what was it? I just saw it in the credits. Maybe a bit spotty, sort of historically, in terms of the reputation. I don't know that everybody loves all of his films, but I think I would highly recommend people should watch it.
Francis Lawrence.
Yeah. What am I? Why am I blanking on what else he's made?
He did I Am Legend, Constantine. I liked both of those.
Right. Yeah, I actually liked both those movies.
Water for Elephants. He did the first three of the Hunger Games movies: Catching Fire and the Two Mockingjays, Red Sparrow, Slumberland. Oh, the new Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Long Walk, and he's going to do the next year's Hunger Games, Sunrise and the Reaping.
That's really fascinating, because the Hunger Games is so very much
influenced
someone read
by
the Hunger Games.
Walk.
Yeah, somebody read The Long Walk and then wrote the Hunger Games for a young adult audience, right? And I haven't read The Long Walk yet, but so we can keep it simple for now. But I like it. I highly recommend it. There's a lot to dive into that movie, but
and it shares a key actor with this show too.
It sure does. Yeah. And I hope it's not the same continuity.
Well, he plays, what's his name, Collie something in that movie. But yeah, Joshua Odjick, who plays Taniel, who we're going to talk about later in this episode, he plays a key character in The Long Walk too. So
who becomes more prominent as the movie goes on too.
Right. Yeah. So 2 recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah. Should I say my hot takes about this episode?
Yes, please.
We're halfway through the season. I'm enjoying the show. I'm nerding about it a little bit and like questioning things, but also enjoying things in a way that maybe I wouldn't if I wasn't so familiar with the property. But I think this episode is a great encapsulation of that aspect, because on the one hand, I'm so into this like 15-minute sequence with the glue, but on the other hand, I'm like covering my eyes a little bit, like don't mess it up, right? But I'm here for it for the most part. I don't know where they're going with it. I like this episode overall. I don't know kind of where it fits in terms of my sort of ranking with the other episodes, because I was so distracted by a lot of the lore talk. There's a lot of backstory in this episode. It kind of takes over in a sense. But, and I think from a filmmaking perspective, it's a little confusing, because it makes me wonder where we're going for 2 more seasons, right? They've given us stuff from 1908. They're giving us stuff from, hundreds or thousands of years ago or whatever. Are we going to get to season 3 and be like, yeah, we already know what happens in 1908 or whatever, everybody. So so many of my things that could be construed as critiques in this season are almost just like, I wonder if, or I hope
fear
that
for the
kind
future.
of, yeah, like I don't think it's bad what they did here, but it makes me, it just raises so many questions just from a sort of like, how are they going to sustain this and make this satisfying? And for the most part, the characters are pretty endearing, and that can be enough. Like if we get to 1908 and we understand the lore way too much, but they create a cool set of characters for us to follow, and they're well written. I mean, I just watched a movie where a bunch of kids walked for 2 hours, and it was gripping, and every minute of it, I was super into it. So like, there's an argument for getting this all out of the way. Like, we want to know what happened with the 1908. Oh, okay. Well, they're going to make a mention. Oh, there's a Bradley Gay massacre in the 1930s. Okay, they spoiled that. Okay, they're going to spoil the history of Pennywise or whatever. Okay, spoil that. Okay, now we can get to what I said two or three episodes ago, which is the reason you go to Stephen King is for the character development and for the human drama. And maybe we can do that now. So the jury's out on this episode, I think, in terms of how it, like, whether it's successful or not, but I enjoyed it and I'm fascinated by what this show is doing. And I think in general, I would say that about the show.
Yeah.
Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, I said earlier that, like, I think it's difficult to spoil this story at all because we don't know what's going to happen with this batch of characters, aside from the fact that, like, we know Will has to survive to grow up to have Mike as a kid. We know that. We know Leroy, his father, has to survive because he's in the movies. Beyond that, we don't really know what's going to happen to most of the individual kids. So,
Sorry. Leroy is in the movies?
Yeah.
How do I not remember that?
So yeah, this is again spoiler for the future for the movies which are set in the future, but are anyway. It's difficult to spoil here, but in the movie version, which is a bit different from the book version, Mike's parents died in a fire, and he was raised by his grandfather Leroy after that.
So I sort of thought it was uncle or something like that. I don't remember what it is in the book.
In the book, it's his parents definitely did not die. I'm to the part now where I was just listening to a chapter about Mike and his parents, and it's a shame that they went a different direction in the movies, but yeah.
So that's a spoiler that I didn't know. I was like, that's actually interesting for the scene with the river later, because I was wondering, fear of your father in Korea, you hear these stories of him getting shot down or whatever, or is this premonition or something? But it's not a premonition if he's alive in the 1980s. So, okay, anyways, interesting. Thank you for educating me on that point. I forgot that I haven't seen the film since I probably saw Chapter 2 when that came out. Might have been the last time I saw those films. Still need to check them out.
Yeah. As far as for this, like as far as the lore around the entity itself, I knew that you were nervous about it, and so when I saw this, I was like, "Oh, this did not go as far as I think Mark feared." This really kept it in a safe, vague enough space that I hoped that you were happy about that, not disturbed by that. I think that last episode there was some critique about the whole running around the graveyard shenanigans, but now we are back to a real proper scare, one that really rivals the whole birthing scenes. So I know a lot of people have eye horror. I think that they have shown that they are experts, the makers of this show, in creating the tension and making us squirm, like just little details like that eye stalk scene that I referenced, we're past spoilers, where she's cutting at her eyes and then it transitions to Charlotte cutting cherry tomatoes. Like, oh my God, come on.
Echoes of the Game of Thrones. There's like a season where Sam is cleaning latrines or something and he's slopping waste buckets or whatever, and then it shows somebody like pouring porridge or something, and just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm still traumatized 5 years later.
And then, I like to see the characters, more of the adult characters pulling together. I think that that's where the second movie got it wrong most for me, is not really in making me feel the reality of the adult friendships as much as the child friendships. So I'm hoping that Charlotte and Rose become besties after this. So yeah, those are pretty much my hot takes. I will save my further thoughts for the breakdown. Do you have any final hot takes before we get into the break and the episode itself?
Let's get into it.
All right. going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to break down the episode one group of characters or plot arc at a time. Okay, welcome back. Let's start with the Square Squad mission. The kids rush their newly developed photos from the cemetery shenanigans last episode to the police station, trying to exonerate Ronnie's dad, Hank Grogan, only to find that the adults can't see any of the ghosts they saw, most of which seem to have disappeared. After Police Chief Clint Bowers belittles and dismisses them, they regroup. They decide that they need to begin by gathering more information about what they're dealing with, digging into Derry's dark past for answers. So what did you, were you, I mean, I guess none of us were surprised that the photo thing didn't work out.
So I was kind of, well, help me clarify something. Have you seen the episode more than once? Did you do a second watch?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So help me. Is it that the photos actually have changed or that the adults can't see? I wasn't sort of clear, like, wait, because are the ghosts in the photographs and the adults are just Pennywise blind, or has Pennywise changed them?
The kids couldn't see them either anymore.
Got it. Okay.
Except for Pennywise, everyone could see Pennywise, but the adults were like, well, that's just a statue. And the kids are like, it's a clown. It's a creepy clown.
And that fits in with my expectations. So I was surprised by that fact. I was wondering, whoa, did the photos get like transformed or whatever? I expected the adults would not be able to see it, but I thought it would be more of the blindness thing. Yeah, I mean, this is a very frustrating but understandable, expected kind of moment, right? That even if when you've got 6 kids or whatever it is insisting on a thing, the chief is going to be incapable of believing them. And I noticed something looking outside. If I ever become mayor, by the way, like, don't let me do this. But when it says, like, when you drive through a town and it says, like, welcome to Boston, Massachusetts, Mayor Michelle Wu. And there's like a sign. And I'm like, they paid somebody to make a sign. Like, there's a vanity to that. And I noticed, right. And I don't think Michelle Wu did that in Boston, but towns do that. And then it says Derry Police Department Chief Clint Bowers. And I looked at the sign, and the sign is old. So I'm thinking,
he's been in that role.
Yeah. He's been in that role a long time. And there's obviously the vanity element. Like, really? You commissioned a sign? Come on. Because chief oftentimes is an elected position, right? And so there's a presumption of permanence that he has, which is interesting. And so if we think of somebody who is under the spell of Derry, I think the guy who's been the police chief for over a decade has to be so far deep, right? Because you couldn't be in that job ignoring child murders and stuff like that if you were able to be critical and stuff like that. And so I felt like with a very small sort of symbol out front of the police department, they were able to telegraph just how kind of baked in to the town and its, I guess, ambivalence the chief is. Right.
Yeah, I mean, and we know obviously that his son becomes the chief because his son is the chief at the time of the original movie. So yeah, I mean, there's a sort of stagnant. It's not an active corruption. It's like a stagnancy. But yeah, Clint Bowers sucks. We're going to talk about him again later when we get back to talking about Charlotte. But I really enjoyed we have now I'm calling them the Square Squad. They've come together fully, and we have some conversations where they are strategizing. They're like, okay, so the photo thing didn't work. What's next? And I find it interesting that it's Will, Mike Hanlon's father, Mike from the original movies, who becomes the librarian. It's Will who says, the first thing I do is find out if there's a history of stuff like this happening in Derry. Like, oh, interesting. Your son one day will think similar.
Okay, can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
I don't think Henry Bowers' dad is chief of police in the timeline later.
No, oh, no?
I think he's just like
a policeman.
And I mentioned that a couple episodes ago that it feels like that family has fallen in prominence in the generation. And we know of Butch, I think his name is. Henry Bowers' dad is sort of a, abusive dad, drinking problem like Butch Bowers.
He's an alcoholic cop. Maybe not the
okay.
chief of police, but he's a policeman.
Okay, so if he's a policeman, I don't know that he's that makes a lot of sense then.
But yeah, no, I just think it's, I'm always curious because, of course, what ties the movies together with these episodes of television? We're going back in time. So there are, again, inherent spoilers where, things like we know Mike's going to exist, therefore Will cannot die, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get a tease that Lily will not ask her mom about growing up in Derry, which is understandable because her mom's been awful to her. And now we learn in this episode, her mom's basically just like living on Valium to deal with everything. So that begs the question, will Lily's mom be a character next season? And will she and Lily come to a better understanding this season if her mom has been through similar in her childhood?
It's interesting. The age thing could work, right? She would be pretty young last cycle, right? But it's possible. It is interesting because
she'd be the right age.
I feel like the language of the It universe, they tell us a lot about your experiences as a kid by how you are as an adult, right? And so we don't have a lot of, we've talked about this before, but the adults that are woke, so to speak, often are the ones who maybe have encountered something. So her mother is either a kid during the last cycle who wasn't a loser, put it this way. That was one of the other kids who was on the peripheral of it, or she's so traumatized by what she experienced that she's been, sedating herself as an adult. So that's an interesting, It's different from the way we see most of the other adult reactions, sort of, right? Like Rose hasn't forgotten about the Galoo, right? She's an adult, though I think generationally she'd be a little bit different, but, that's interesting. Yeah, because that's 2 cycles ago, right? But Lily's mom is sort of a different manifestation of that. So I would believe that, but I think that they would be kind of carving out a new path for the way that someone copes with it. But which is not like an impossible or a negative thing. I mean, one of the losers kills himself when he finds out It is back as an adult. Right. Stan, the first scene in the novel, I think it is, right? Is him committing suicide when he gets the letter or the call from Mike saying the monster's back. And so he obviously wasn't able to cope with it as an adult in a sort of emotionally healthy way, right? So this wouldn't be out of the norm, but it is very different, I would say, from how they've shown other adults handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, 2 things. One is that Lily's mom, if she did experience something like this, maybe that actually informs the way she's so awful to Lily. Like she thinks she's protecting her. And then the other thing I would say the big difference between her and Rose is that Rose grew up being told this story over and over as a warning.
Right.
We see with Tanya later, her nephew, that this is a story that the children of Maturin will say that's what they are calling. I don't know if that's, I guess that's what they're calling the entire tribe. That indeed
that's what it's the whole tribe is called that?
It's at least a group of them, but I think it's maybe their, the translation of their names for themselves.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
and we're going to talk about Maturin
that.
Lane. Yeah. But Rose, it's something that she's been told over and over since she was a kid. So it sticks with her in a different way, I think. And I think that there's something to be said also for the difference in culture, where this is something that I've complained about with, I grew up in the US and there's a sense of like, we don't talk about that. No, and that is what we see happening with particularly the white adults in Derry. Whereas someone like Rose, it's like, we talk about it over and over. So you never forget.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fascinating just difference, is like the experiences might be different. There's different history, right? The tribe has been here longer, but also actually the real terror of the creature didn't exist until the colonists were there anyways, actually, right? So that's when the real massacring started. So
but that was before Rose's time.
Oh, sure. That's 300 years ago or whatever. But like culturally, there's actually a similar era of shared history. Like, sure, Pennywise was there thousands of years ago, but they pretty much weren't interacting with the forest. They would just leave it alone, right?
Millions, yeah.
Millions, right. But you know,
they were only there
here
thousands.
Back then.
Yeah.
So the Earth is only a few thousand years old, Elysia. Sorry, I shouldn't go there. I don't need to poke anybody. So where was I? Sorry, distracting myself. It's early, the coffee's kicking in. So we have the same history. We can't say that it's like, oh, well, there's so much more time that the tribe has versus the sort of colonists, right? The American or British settlers. But it's the transmission of information that is just so different. If you think about what Derry would be like if every day at the dinner table, the families of Derry said, let's talk about the cycle of the creature. And those kids were primed to be aware of it. Right. Maybe not every day, but like think how much death would probably be averted if that was the case, right? And how different the tribe is able to somehow resist the spell, so to speak. And I don't know if some of their land is literally maybe outside of the boundary of Derry. That.
But they're not forgetting.
We'll talk about the pillars and all that.
Yeah. We'll talk about all that later. But yeah, it is interesting that the backgrounds and how Rose and Dustaniel are probably a bit more prepared. Although Taniel, as we already talked about, was born between the cycles. So anyway, yeah, the cycles, by the way, one of the questions that's going to come up at the end. But for now, let me ask you about the adult ally that Lily does have at this point in the story. We got a name for her. Ingrid is what they're calling the woman from the head housekeeper from the asylum. Do we trust her? She says she remembers kids going missing. She forgot about the Bradley gang massacre. And she's just being so helpful and, believing Lily and encouraging Lily and her group of friends to stick together. And do we think, I think we all agree she knows something. There are theories. Have you heard the theories about who she might be?
No.
That the theory is that she is Mrs. Kirsch from the second movie, who is the daughter of Bob Gray, who is the basis that the entity used, the basis for Pennywise from. So she could be that child clown that we saw in that 1908 flashback.
She'd be way too young for that, though. This woman's like
she's in her late 60s.
No way.
I know she is, though.
Wow, she won the genetic lottery. Oh my God, if I look 20 years younger when I'm in my 60s. Okay, all right. So she's in her. So she could be you're saying that. So Bob Gray is a real. So Bob Gray in the novel is a novel that is a moniker that sometimes Pennywise takes. Right.
Oh,
yeah.
But he's a real person. But
Pennywise will also refer to himself as Bob Gray sometimes in like just like when he's masquerading as a human or whatever. So Bob Gray is an actual clown that existed in the 1908 timeline, right? Mm-hmm. You're saying that she could be his daughter.
Right. And we've seen a young girl clown in the 1908 flashbacks last week.
Briefly, yeah.
And we know, Bob Gray, we saw him in the movies, the 2017 and 19 movies. We've seen a picture of him is indeed played by Bill Skarsgård, as is Pennywise. So we know that that's a character that exists. And then there was that whole thing where adult Beverly in the second movie went to visit her old apartment, and there was a Mrs. Kirsch there who talks about her father being Bob Gray, and then it turns out it was Pennywise who was pretending to be this woman. So that was probably not the real Mrs. Kirsch in the second movie.
Right.
But if there is, we've met one character named Kirsch in this TV show, which is the butcher.
I was going to say not the pharmacist, it's the butcher was a Kirsch.
Right. Okay. Wasn't it? Because Cleaver Stanley
one of the shop
or whatever.
Guys. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the thing that I'm wondering about her is again, it goes back to this, like, what's the behavior? Like, she's a caring adult, it seems. That's a good sign. But there isn't a lot of urgency in this conversation. She's kind of like, well, you know, good things come to those who wait. Friends stick together. Like, she's saying these kind of like really
platitudes.
Sure, that's the word. Yeah, like heartwarming things, but like she's not like stick with your friends, Lily. Trust me. She's not
right.
Like, if she was somebody who had witnessed a monster, like that was kind of like, so to speak, a loser back in 1908, there would be a little more fear or a little more kind of urgency to what she's saying. But if you're saying like this is someone who's somehow connected to Pennywise in a more sinister, like, I just don't know. I don't know. This it's interesting. She did not need to be in this episode. That scene didn't really give us much except that like, so
other than remember this character.
Yeah, exactly. She's gonna matter later. And whether it's, hopefully it's this season and not just next season, they're like, oh, remember this woman that you thought was 40 who is actually 60, who now looks 30, like, or like, and then
that would be a
her,
different actress. So yeah.
No, but 2 seasons later, like, I don't know, like, I don't know what it is, but they're setting something up, and I don't know. We'll have to see.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does remind me, you know, you were saying about it's not like she's warning her urgently, which is something we saw a bit with Rose with Charlotte. You know, Charlotte's like, is there something weird about this town? And Rose is like, let me just say, keep your family close.
Exactly. Yeah. No ambiguity there. There's a little more urgency there.
Right. I mean, and that's the question is, if she is this, if she is a child of Bob Gray, then that still doesn't answer, is she a good or a malevolent? You know, has she been influenced by Pennywise, and is she somehow like some sort of helper of him, like we see Henry Bauer in the second film? Or is she like, oh, I know, and I'm trying to actually help Lily warn against him? So I don't know. I think it's a very interesting theory that so far tracks for me.
Okay, Madeline Stowe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need proof.
You need proof that she's, I think she's like
she's not my age. Okay, 67 years old. Oh my gosh. That's what. Good for her. Good for her. Okay, we can move on now that my sense has been shattered of perspective. All right.
Speaking of preservation, I think it's interesting we get into, we've referred to before about how Pennywise likes to, quote unquote, salt his meat with fear. And that's why he torments characters for a while before actually going for them. And so we actually get our science guy, Will, is explaining that there's the adrenal gland. It releases adrenaline. And that is, and cortisol for that matter, by the way, and that is the quote unquote salt of the meat that Pennywise likes, which is very interesting because hunters, I grew up in hunting territory, and they try to avoid stressing the animals because adrenaline and cortisol makes the meat taste worse. Like the muscles get tensed, so it's tough meat. The stress responses decreases the glycogen in the muscles, which after death glycogen, you want it to have the right balance, so it converts into the right balance of lactic acid, which makes it taste nice when you cook it, you know, keeps the meat tender and pink and flavorful. And this prolonged fear response is kind of the worst for this. So just quoting grassfedcattle.com, but if stress persists for an extended period of time, the changes are even worse. The persistent high acidity in the meat caused by long-term cattle stress will actually begin breaking down the meat, almost as if the body is digesting itself. The meat becomes dark, soft, mushy, and sticky, very similar to bruised meat, and will have a very limited shelf life. In the industry, these types of cattle are called dark cutters. Yuck. So,
Yuck is right.
I mean, I suppose this is like the gaminess in wild meat comes a bit from this. Obviously, you don't want it to be extreme. So maybe it is the gamier flavor. And also Pennywise is not human. So maybe Pennywise really likes his flavor. Do you have any thoughts about the salting of the meat?
Humans are not universal. My dog will like walk up and sniff your socks when they come off your and love it. You know, like the dog, like animals, other predators like stink in a way that humans don't. I do think either A, you're right, that last postulate there that like, okay, well, Pennywise might like it, even though it tastes worse, right? B, kids are just wrong sometimes, right? Though this feels a little bit, I think people might view this a little bit like the midichlorians thing. Like they're trying to give like a chemistry explanation for the Force.
But
right?
it is, I mean, but this is the explanation from the books.
No, but the salting of the meat, they don't say that it's adrenaline that causes that.
But it's fear. So what is fear?
That's right.
It's the release of adrenaline and cortisol.
Fear is to Pennywise, fear is a mystical, I don't know that there's science causing that to be true. I understand that Pennywise likes fear, but that could be a cosmic thing, right? It doesn't mean it's literally a chemical. And the fact that the kid says, was it Will or whoever it was, says, oh yeah, meat tastes like, I think they say that the chemical makes meat taste better. And you're saying that grassfedcattle.com, which couldn't possibly have an angle in this, they say the opposite.
It's not, I mean, like this is, I quoted grassfedcattle.com because they had that thing about the dark meat, but this is just, I grew up knowing this because I grew up in hunting country.
You don't want
like the Japanese have developed special, sometimes controversial methods for the way they kill fish in order to avoid this happening. It is known. This is just scientifically, it is what it is. I don't think we should be questioning that aspect of it. I mean, I don't mean to question it at all, to be honest. It's just interesting that Pennywise, something that humans actively avoid, is something that Pennywise seeks. Which
totally, that's not surprising at all. I don't know that it has necessarily a lot to do with the chemistry, is what I'm saying. I guess I think there's something. I think we should take
that at face value.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter is the important thing, right? Whatever it is, Pennywise likes the result that he gets or she gets after the chase, right?
Right.
So whether that would be true to a human hunting or not is irrelevant, really.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if I don't really know how we see mom's pills to stop from feeling scared. Mother's little helpers, which is what they literally would call diazepam, which most people know as Valium. Back in this time, to the point that the Rolling Stones made a song called Mother's Little Helper. So I wonder if that takes away the flavor because you don't have the stress response when you're on Valium the same way.
Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? Because the kids have the stuff now, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, except Lily dropped at least some of it in the toilet.
She lost it, yeah. Maybe we'll see some super chilled out kid that's immune to Pennywise. I don't know. This is, is it? But see, this is exactly, I think, what Stephen King wouldn't want us to do is like wonder, well, what if you took a drug that increased your level of susceptibility? Like if you were on a psychedelic or something that increases your, sensitivity to this kind of stimulation, would that make Pennywise like you more? And probably we're not supposed to wonder that too much because it's not sciencey. You think he loves it? You think?
I don't know that he loves it, but I think he did I don't think Stephen King is himself a scientist, but I do think he's thought about that in the writing of the book and provided the seeds of that they're just making slightly more explicit in this show.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
I love Rich. He was, you can see like that he feels we learned last week, he feels a certain amount of privilege that, he sees the experience in the U.S. despite being Cuban. He sees his different experience in the U.S. differently than Will does. And here we have him mouthing off to the police officer to the point it's like, Rich, shut up. But he's also the good comic relief later. Like just the kids' actors' responses and his timing and stuff is great when, when Will's talking about this whole, he's salting us to eat us. And he's like, that's a horrible theory. It's just a theory. That's a horrible theory. So I enjoyed Rich this episode, even though he made me cringe with the cops.
I think this kid is one. I want to see this kid like turn into a comic actor, like grow up. Like he's pretty good. He's not in it as centrally as the others yet, but I really like his presence. I think he's really important to the sort of Richie Tozier aspect of the Losers, like the kind of jokester. He's not quite the same. By the way, we had a last name. It's not Tozier. He doesn't.
No,
he's not,
it's true.
It's Ricardo Santo, or I think was his name, which is definitely like, I don't know if people want to keep on that theory, but I think probably it's unlikely. But yeah, I love this little guy.
Yeah, it's Ricardo Santos, and also, I wondered for a minute. I was like, oh, well, maybe he dies and Marge names her son after him. But now that Marge is one eye down at the end of this episode, I think that she is probably not Margaret Tozier either, because there was no eye trauma in Richie Tozier's mom.
That's ever mentioned. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last time. Like, if there's a whole lot of crazy backstory there, the fact that it doesn't come up in the novels or the films is significant.
I mean, we see briefly his mom in the film, and she does not have any eye trauma. I mean, she could have had a replacement eye or something, but there's no scarring or anything like that. So I don't know. So I guess I'm laying to rest for now. The Rich is Richie Tozier's, even though he seems so much like Richie Tozier in personality.
Sure, yeah. You know how many Owens are in my kids' like sports teams, and just names are names, right? So Rich, we got Margaret, we got Maggie. Like, I know, but like, but we're having this conversation because of the name, also, right? And I think if we accept the name as just a name, like we can think about the personality as being a Kingian trope, right? King has the bully. King has the comedic jokester. King often has the sort of, there's the like token girl in some of these stories, right? Which is not true in this, obviously. But there's just sort of an archetype that is being filled by Rich, right?
Right. All right. Let's switch gears and talk about the Hanlons. Do you want to set that up?
The haunted Hanlons. Will's mother, Charlotte, finds the graveyard photos in Will's room, and he confesses to her that they feel there is something after them. Charlotte, uneasy about the recent murder of other children, pressures Leroy to take Will on a boys' bonding day that weekend. But when they go fishing, Pennywise attacks, preying on Will's worst fears of his dad burning to death in battle. When Leroy sees the marks on his son's wrist, where the entity grabbed him, his own questions grow, especially after a second Pennywise sighting at home. Meanwhile, he's growing frustrated with his wife, who he feels is putting the family in danger with her activism. Now stepping in to help Hank Grogan's defense, unable to sit back and let a black man take the blame for a crime everybody knows he didn't commit.
All right, so where do you want to start with this section?
Let's start with Will talking to his mom. I think it's interesting that we don't see him say the word ghost or monster or clown. They talk about the photo, and he sort of expresses this sort of general distress. There's something after us, but does he say more? Like, how similar when he's talking to his dad later, like he's opening up to his parents in kind of a surprising and refreshing way, and a good for him that they're kind of believing him. They're not dismissing him. But is he really explaining it, or is he deliberately keeping the kind of cards close to his vest so they don't think he's, hallucinating or whatever? What do you think on that?
Yeah. I mean, so part of my one ding against Charlotte so far is she was totally snooping, but that is a mom thing to do. But I was like, wow, Will is much more open with his parents than the kids in this story normally are. But then indeed, he pulled back from the supernatural explanation. So he's afraid to, I think, maybe sound unhinged to his mom, even though I think she's starting to get there herself anyway. At least, at this point, at least, he hasn't had, other than the graveyard, he hasn't had at this point in the episode the big scares himself. So by the end of the episode, he's had more of the big scares himself, but then his dad is the one who witnesses them more. So we see him at first pulling back from the supernatural explanation. I think that's going to change. I do think it's interesting that So we have the fishing trip, and then in the fishing trip, he sees this, the Yellow Eyes is in the water and pretending to be his dad, burned from having gone down in a flight in war, because that is Will's greatest fear for his father, and says, instead of you'll float too, it's you'll burn too.
I thought the same thing. So similar.
Yeah. I think that's intentional for sure. But then Leroy, we were wondering, because of his lack of fear response, does that mean Pennywise can't mess with his visions? But apparently that does not mean that, because Leroy can see the marks on Will's wrists from where he was grabbed in the water. He can see the red balloons. He sees the red balloon by the lake. And then after Will sees Pennywise or some clown figure outside of his bedroom window, Leroy sees the red balloon there as well. So yeah, he's definitely witnessing this. What do we think? So Leroy and the whole lack of fear response, we've talked about that a lot, but is he feeling anger instead of fear? And can Pennywise manipulate that as well?
I mean, I think the question can also be asked, just like, how much of this is deliberate? Does Pennywise want Will to see those balloons? Or not Will? Does Pennywise want Leroy to see those balloons? Or is he inadvertently, how much do we know how much Pennywise knows of this military organization? Like, there's a psychic guy with The Shining investigating him, and Pennywise seems to know that, right? Interacted with Dick. So, does he know that this is connected to Leroy? I don't know to what extent what the real motives for the military group is. We know what they seem to be after, which is a weapon or whatever, but this dagger or whatever it is, or Pennywise himself is a weapon. But the degree that it knows, oh my gosh, there's actually a real threat here, or is that still not clear? Or does it know something we don't, which is this isn't a real threat. Actually, these adults are just furthering my sort of aims. And how Leroy fits in with that is an interesting aspect, right? Because the lack of amygdala making him not feel fear doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether the sort of spell of indifference that Pennywise can cast upon the adults would affect Leroy, but it doesn't seem to be affecting Leroy. So is that anger? Is that, I mean, I think if we talk to Nicole, she probably wouldn't let us just say that no amygdala equals no fear, because fear is a complex emotion, right? Yeah. So there's something he still doesn't want his son to get attacked by something in the water, right? Whether he feels actual fear or not.
There's self-preservation, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So his meat might not be being salted, but that doesn't mean he's not still oh my gosh, this is crazy. So why did he see that balloon? Is it because of Pennywise or despite Pennywise? Would everybody be interfacing with this little piece of evidence in the same way? Or is Leroy uniquely capable of seeing the scratches, seeing the balloons, etc.?
Another related question that I had is does Pennywise show up when there's strife at home? Does Pennywise wait for there to be friction in the family and play upon that? Because we have here, things are getting more tense, as we said, but between Charlotte and Leroy, because he's stop putting yourself out there, and thereby putting the entire family out there with all of your activism. And it was a little bit it did make my blood anger spike a little bit to see Polly kind of spying on Charlotte in a way, accidentally spying on Charlotte, and seeing her go to the police, and then clearly running back and reporting to his bestie, you know what your wife's up to?
What was he doing just hanging out? He was in a group just standing by the building.
Yeah, he was
kind of weird,
town.
But
yeah,
that guy hasn't shown bad motive to that, but
we don't know anything about Polly yet.
We really don't. Yeah. Jury's still out, I guess. But as of now, they're, he's at least telling he told the friend, he told Leroy, he didn't go and tell somebody else that we don't want to know. But I think it goes back to that question that we've talked about a couple times, which is bad things happen in Derry. Are they because of it, or do they kind of also bring it out? And so does hostility in the home happen because of Pennywise's presence, or is he more available to infiltrate a household when that household has strife? I think either could be true. We see the kids in the novel and in the movie, like it's moments of stress that things might happen, right? Panic and things like that. So I think yes and would be the answer to that. The arguments, it's interesting though, because the arguments between the parents, there's like a nobility to that family strife. Like they're having like a mature disagreement on how to handle their family and how visible to be in the society. Like there's nothing shameful about the argument that they're having. This isn't a child abuse situation or like some of the other, or alcoholism, like some of the other family strife we see in the novel and the films. And so this doesn't really feel like a dispute about how much of an activist you should be in Maine. Doesn't feel really like Pennywise is in, right? That's not the kind of thing that should fuel Pennywise much.
I mean,
depending on where they settle, though, where they end up.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it could be fueling Leroy kind of ignoring, in a typical Derry way, the issues. So they have this exchange between Charlotte and Leroy, where he says to her, "Don't be looking for trouble," and she says, "There's gonna be trouble anywhere we go," referring to the fact that they are black. Yeah. That's the country you swore your life to defend. I'm just making it worth defending, which, again, in case it's not clear, I'm always on Charlotte's side, except when she's snooping in her son's room. And then later, it's like he's blaming her for things like, "See what you did, someone's watching the house." And the someone watching the house is obviously Pennywise. And Charlotte did not cause that to happen, but Leroy's ready to blame her.
Yeah. I think Charlotte in 2025 eyes is the person we're supposed to be more sympathetic, but it's also tough for me to, like, we haven't seen Leroy contribute to the systems of oppression, but I can't criticize the man for saying, "I'm going to try to be with the system and try to see what good I can do." Like, we haven't seen him abuse and put down his friends in the black community. Like, so I don't want to say 100% that Leroy's wrong and she's right. I think there's an approach to him being a soldier that maybe could still be supportive of her mission, sort of her activist principles, that maybe he's not being supportive of, that would be better. But like, it's hard for me to totally say I'm on her side. I feel like I want to believe that her path is the righteous path, but I also know that a lot of people died or had their lives ruined by taking that activist path. And I don't begrudge somebody in the 1960s for saying, "You know what, I'm just going to level up my rank in the military and my family maybe eventually won't get targeted by the racists," right? Like that maybe he's naive, maybe he's not.
Or maybe gets targeted more. Yeah.
Maybe he's wrong, and maybe he's not supporting the long arc of history bending towards justice. But it's hard. I mean, this guy was born in the 20s or something like that, or no, the 30s probably. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to say that he's wrong in that environment. But they can both be right. Sort of. I want her to be right, though. Right. To fast forward a little bit, like, I want to think Hank Grogan, dude, really? It's worse for them to think you slept with a white married woman than to kill kids? I want to think that's insane, but I also know that maybe it's not insane. That for him, it might actually be worse to have slept with a married white woman in that era, in that culture. I don't want that to be true. But it's hard for me to say that's not logical on some way.
Are you familiar with the story of Emmett Till?
Of course. But that was 7 years before this. And yeah, Emmett Till was for anyone who doesn't know, he was a black kid from Chicago who went to visit, I think it was in Mississippi. He went to visit family or something. And he just he was speaking to a white woman on the street. Talked to the wrong person.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was accused of hitting on her, basically. This is like a teenager. And and he was killed very horribly, very horribly. I would say there is a movie called Till, which is from his mother's perspective, that got some attention a few years ago. But I honestly think the depiction that will never, ever leave my head of this comes from Lovecraft Country, the horror show that happened a few years ago. If you like this show, absolutely watch Lovecraft Country. That was
it's wild. That show's wild.
Yeah.
Again, though, Emmett Till did nothing and was murdered for it. This guy is going to be killed for well, but he's going to be probably killed in Shawshank for murdering kids. So like the option is not, should I face accusations about sleeping with a white woman and ruin her life and probably get killed by a mob, versus should I just be a guy who works at the theater? No, he's facing possibly execution, but certainly Shawshank and probably getting shivved in Shawshank by somebody or whatever. So I want to believe that, well, obviously the child murderer is worse, but because this isn't Mississippi, this is Maine, but I can't tell you it is worse. I think there's a certainty he has that it would be just as bad and worse for the woman. Like he obviously has some kind of affection for the women. Do we think, is this a random person, or is this going to turn out to be important who the woman is?
I mean, I think that for me, my mind immediately jumped to like, is this Bauer's wife or something like that?
Or somebody prominent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be
Shaw's wife, or yeah.
If we think of like what would lead to, I know we said Butch Bowers is a police officer, but he's also a drunk ne'er-do-well child abuser, fallen somewhat far from what seems to be a sort of respectable Clint Bowers. So maybe if that is, if it comes out that... I don't think
Clint is respectable at all based on what we've seen.
In the community?
I mean, sure.
No,
yeah.
I think he's...
I mean, his father... his son becomes a police officer too. And so maybe he's seen with the same respectability. People sure were upset when Henry Bowers killed his father in the movies. But yeah, Clint Bowers is the worst of the adults.
But I think Clint Bowers is exactly a good example of Derry being Derry. That probably people think, like I said, I think chiefs are often an elected position. This guy might get, people might think he's the best guy, might think he's the bee's knees. And that's exactly what sucks so much about Derry. Mm-hmm, the adults will... Someone who's an enabler of this evil, like, and perpetuates it, is exactly what they need from a police chief. So I think we're supposed to see, from what we see of his kid and what we're seeing of Clint, that there is a difference in social status there. And I'm just saying, well, okay, if it is that his mom had or like Clint's wife had an affair with a black man who then is lynched later in the season for that, or something like that, that could explain the sort of kind of thing that could drive somebody to be an abuser later and a drunk and things like that for his, 10-year-old son right now. I don't know. I'm spinning out on what would be like, could there be, that would be a possible way in which the actual woman in this equation matters, as opposed to, because they could just say, never tell us who it is. And it does, because it doesn't have to matter. We have enough sort of to cause this story moment and this character moment for Hank without it actually being somebody that matters. Oh, it's Ingrid. It's like some character, the town mayor's wife, or somebody that somehow is prominent. They have a choice. It either matters or it doesn't. And that would be one way it would, obviously, if it was the chief. And that's the thing, I think, is like we're thinking of him as making a darkly rational decision, which is to say, I would rather be convicted of child murder than found out to be having an affair with this woman. But Emmett Till did not make a choice to, he talked to some lady in town and got killed for it. Hank, to some extent, knowingly did the, I'm sorry to say, but irrational behavior of sleeping with a married white woman in Maine in 1960s. Like that doesn't mean it's not understandable. That doesn't mean there isn't emotions that made it. Maybe they're in love and it's the best thing he ever did. But we think of him as being almost self-preservationally rational. Like I would rather go to Shawshank than face what's going to happen if they catch us. But yet that same man, some number of months earlier or whatever, or days earlier, made the
it was not a
self-destructive decision to do this, right? So it's interesting because he's not saying it didn't happen. He actually had an affair with this woman, and he lost his self-preservation in making that decision. I'm sorry to say, but in the 1960s, in this universe, in Derry, as he understands Derry clearly, that is unfortunately a risky choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not going to speak out against what he's about him having the affair, but it is interesting that I assumed when Clint Bowers was saying like, "Oh, we have a witness who saw you outside." I assumed that was just someone making stuff up, but it turns out, yeah, he really was out of the house during the murders, and someone really did see him. So, Charlotte, though, I'm a bit worried about how she's handling it. The first time she came, it was a masterclass to see how she held her composure with this police officer. The second time she came back, she came spitting fire, and I'm going to have, the president after you, and name drops all these big politicians who would support her cause, and, it's kind of elbows her way into being able to talk to Hank. And I'm worried about that, about how Clint is going to respond to being treated that way, even though it is more satisfying to see that rather than her being like, "Yes, sir." And then the other thing was when she's talking to Hank, she's like, "I promise I'm going to get you out of here." I'm like, "Oh God, now I know he's not getting out." Charlotte, stop making promises to this man.
Oh my God,
I'm worried about Hank, and I'm worried about Charlotte too.
Totally.
So.
And I think, having lived my whole life in, quote, northern states, which is to say California being a part of the North, even though it's quite far south, and New England, I've knowing people that are from the South and stuff like that, including Black folks who are from the South, like a difference is community, right? So like racial oppression and things like that have been worse traditionally throughout American history in the Southern United States, with obvious exceptions. But there's often this case where there's at least a critical mass and there's Black community and things like that. And so I say all that because she is going in guns blazing to the chief's office that second time, but there isn't an infrastructure of activists here, right? She maybe has the support of some of the people she's met, but there might have been in Shreveport, Louisiana, a bit more of a movement that she could do what she's doing in a context, whereas a bad thing could happen to her and nobody would be there to to say nothing of the supernatural forces that keep people silent in Derry, that there isn't anybody there to go tell one of the Black newspapers in Chicago or whatever other towns that would share this information, like Emmett Till, right? Like, so she is behaving in a way that is clearly referential to this larger movement. She's talking about JFK and MLK and all these sort of figures that would, in her head, have her back. But yet, is that infrastructure, are those networks set up in this part of Maine that could at least protect her or at least be her backup in this sense? It's a scary situation she's putting herself in.
This is another reason why I'm glad they've been setting up a friendship between her and Rose, because Rose might be coming from a somewhat different place, but she is a local activist who is used to working within these frameworks of like, "Oh, we're from the North, we're not racist," but yeah. So yeah. I can't wait to see Charlotte and Rose team up to take on the system. It's what I'm hoping we're going to. Also, Charlotte, you can see, I was so surprised by how the way that she was like really, like I said, coming in guns blazing the second time she went to the police office, because you can see at home how tactical she is, like with her own husband. She seems like she's going to tell him about what's going on about Will, sneaking out at night, going to the graveyard, things like that would obviously really upset Leroy. But then she diffuses the situation by telling Leroy about that Will has a crush on a girl instead. And of course, Leroy's very relieved to find out that it's a girl of color, so that his son wouldn't be subject to the fears that Hank is experiencing.
But then, of course, it's whose daughter is she, right? Comes out later, and that's not
right.
That's not the woman, the girl that he would want his for the
you
sake
move
of
to
safety.
This town, there doesn't seem to be many options, so.
Right, but I don't think that's what he had in mind.
No,
a girl he likes. Oh, it happens to be the person that is being investigated for a child murder right now. Not what Leroy had in mind.
Right. Although I will say, his eventual son Mike's mother's name is Jessica. So,
yeah.
All right.
Is there a Jessica? Have we seen a Jessica yet in this show? I don't think so.
No, we haven't. No. So maybe she moves to town later. All right, let's keep with the Leroy influence side of the story. I'll set up the black spot. General Shaw has granted Dick Halloran and his friends permission to clean up an unused building nearby for their own use. As they clean, Leroy stops by to ask Dick about the mission involving the mysterious entity. He asks Dick what he knows, and Dick has a vision of his grandmother warning him to be careful. So, yeah, Dick and his grandmother, that's definitely something from the books.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that from The Shining and Doctor Sleep last week.
Right. So we don't need to go into that more, but just to remind people, that's his grandmother is the one who taught him about The Shining, and he did have an abusive grandfather, but we haven't seen anything about him yet in the show yet, have we?
No, and I think we're supposed to probably conjecture that his grandmother is not alive anymore at this point.
Right.
And it's unclear whether we're supposed to think that's literally her ghost, which is very much possible with Dick Halloran, or if it's just a vision, right? And I think it's fine either way. We don't need to have the exact clarification there.
Yeah.
I wanted to call out we have 2 needle drops with this plot arc, or 2 in the season. I didn't write down the songs, but we have Ray Charles and Bo Diddley, right? So there's sort of we get a fixing up the place montage to the Bo Diddley, which was a fun sort of throwback kind of use of music.
Yeah, this is, I call these the good vibes montages of the episode. This was where the happy spots were actually them setting up. We call it the black spot. We know that's what it's called. It's just, let's just refer to it by its name and allow people who don't know that to do the Leo pointing meme when they eventually say it in the show. But I did see critique online where people are like, oh, it's great that, the Dick and his friends have a place to hang out, and other people who are like, that's infuriating that they need a separate place so that the racists don't, rain on their parade whenever they go out for a drink.
It's infuriating, but it's easy for us to say, it sucks that they need that. But like I said, a couple of...
Okay. Now that we're on the other side of Halloween, I'm officially ready to declare it. It's the holiday season. And shopping early this year is definitely a good idea with all of the shipping uncertainties. Luckily, Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique, high-quality finds you won't see anywhere else, so that you can cross the important names off your list and relax. You might have heard me say it before, but I've been known to turn to Uncommon Goods over the years for gifts, especially for my family and close friends, the people I want to treat to something unique, memorable, handmade by creative entrepreneurs, something that will last. I've especially plundered the puzzle categories, bought lots of unusual jewelry and accessories. One time I got my friend's son these little baby booties shaped like tacos that still make me laugh every time I see a picture of them. And bonus, with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. They've donated more than $3.1 million to date, so now is the perfect time to start exploring their site before your new favorite gifts sell out. And while you can take advantage of the limited time Lorehounds discount and get 15% off. So don't wait. Cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/lorehounds. That's uncommongoods.com/lorehounds for 15% off. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary.
Episodes ago, this...
Right, it's the safe spaces. Yeah.
Right. To what extent is this going to be in conversation with sinners, right? That starts with the same kind of premise. We need a spot. Of course, folks want to make money in that spot. That might not be true here, but like, can we have this spot that's really just for us where we can unwind? And it's sad that that's necessary, but, and this isn't even nearly as overtly hostile as that setting, right? In terms of the South, right? Obviously, this is Derry. It's way more hostile than any real world place usually is, but, they're not comfortable in the mainstream bar or whatever they were in. And yeah, it sucks, but quite understandable.
Okay, before we take a break and get into the climax of the episode, I just want to talk for a minute about Leroy in this scene with Dick, because there's a couple things going on with him. I have questions about what's going on inside Leroy's head, and Dick's head for that matter, since he's the one with the shining. But we see Leroy, he comes to it seems like he's trying to get information from Dick, which makes sense. But it seems almost like he's eager to do the mission at first. And Dick's like, calm down. You don't actually really want to get deeper into this.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we think he's changed his mind by the end of that. But there's also a moment that stood out to me where Leroy kind of roughly grabs Dick's arm, which was kind of like, whoa, that was a flash of anger there. But then Dick, his face in response made me wonder if he had a vision when Leroy grabbed him. What do you think about Leroy's behavior in this part of the episode?
I don't know what to think yet. I think probably we're going towards him having a sort of change of heart in terms of his enthusiasm for what's happening here. But his specific interactions with Dick, I don't know. It's interesting because they're playing a little fast and loose with how often we see what Dick sees, right? Mm-hmm. It did seem to imply that Dick saw something, felt something, he shined there, but they didn't show it to us. It's not like the grandmother. Doesn't have centrality in the story enough that we see everything he sees. So really no idea there, but there's something that he feels about Leroy that, whether it's from the whole thing where I don't want to see inside you because I don't like the idea of no fear. It's disturbing, or if there's something else. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much we're supposed to read in there.
I do think it's, I like that in the official podcast, they interviewed the actor who plays Dick Halloran this week. And he said in his own mind, he sees this season as, in some ways, a bromance. I'm using the word bromance. I don't think that's the word he used, between Dick, and he calls him Leroy. But so I think that's, it's talking about the adult friendships. I do wonder where that's going to go, because their entire relationship has been both antagonistic, but also in some ways they are allies to each other in ways that other people can't be to them for various reasons.
Yeah, interesting.
On that note, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the two major set pieces that close out the episode. All right, Mark, do you want to set up the best frenemies?
Sure. Marge clearly misses Lily, but when she asks her to eat lunch together, it's part of a cruel trick to embarrass Lily by making her think a popular boy is interested in her, who then plans to publicly shame her, all to impress the patty cakes. Marge has second thoughts about it and is about to tell Lily the truth when she finds herself in the middle of her first Pennywise scare. Her eyes seem to have turned into tubes, like some infected snails she learned about in science class. In a panic, she runs to the woodshop and tries cutting off one of her eye tubes, maiming herself. When Lily holds her down to stop her and take the weapon from her, the next class walks in, finding a situation where it looks like crazy Lily has attacked her former friend.
Yeah, this whole setup and payoff was really, it was one where this show keeps doing things where I think it's going to zig and then it zags instead. Yeah. And this was a key example about like, oh my gosh, you're worried about Lily. Poor Lily is going to be humiliated. And then it turns out, nope, it's not about that at all. This is about that science class. We saw that video where flatworms burrow into land snails. They hijack the brain. It's kind of like cordyceps, I just want to point out, like in The Last of Us, and then ends up creating these eye stalks that attract birds. And we see Marge is horrified by this. So this is what's bothering her. But here's my question. Your eyes grow into stalks. Is your first instinct to cut them off?
Ugh. So that's actually interesting you mentioned that, because I paused the episode in the middle of this and just started researching this, but research meaning like Wikipedia and stuff. Leucochloridium paradoxum. I don't think my instinct would be to cut them off, but interestingly enough, that actually apparently can work. So could I talk about this flatworm for a second? So
yeah, please.
It is the cordyceps, Last of Us fungus sort of comparison is good, but this is a rare parasite that has multiple sort of levels of parasitism in its life cycle. So the snail is just an intermediary host to attract. It grows these long, colorful, pulsating eye sockets to make the snail look like a caterpillar, which then gets eaten by a bird, and the bird is the actual final destination. But it doesn't seem to do much negative to the bird. It's just that the bird is the way that it spreads, right? Because the bird, it'll infect the gut and the cloaca, right? And it'll poop out eggs, which then spread, and the poop gets eaten by the snails, etc. But interestingly enough, to the whole cutting it off, it said, I read that sometimes a bird will, because the pulsating, throbbing, gross eye stalk tubes are where their parasite is. The what's it called? There's a term for the I can't remember, the something sac or whatever. It will sometimes get bitten off, and then the snail survives. So actually, I don't think it's common, but that snail would be without an eye or whatever, but that is the entirety essentially of that parasite.
So maybe they didn't show that part, but maybe the video where they're learning about this snail infection, maybe they did say that, and that's why Marge was driven to take that.
Maybe, but that is, so I have to say this, it looks really stupid when it starts growing out of her eyes. I do not like the way it looks, the CG of it. However, the human terror of this moment is excellent. Like again, the moment where she's looking in the mirror and it grows is really dumb. But her running around and trying to rip it, cut it off, and putting her head under the whatever saw is it. You feel it viscerally. And you mentioned earlier, like, eye terror. Like, I'm the generation that was way too young when Fire in the Sky was on, and I watched that, and that scene in that movie. As a guy who was already afraid of UFO stuff, like to see...
I don't know Fire in the Sky.
Oh my God. Fire in the Sky is a UFO movie. And it came out probably in the early 90s. And there's a scene with an alien abduction. And just this guy he's strapped to the chair by the aliens. And a needle goes right through his eyeball. And that, ever since then, man, just the idea, like... I'm at an optometrist, like blinking. You can't touch my eye. Like, I have like an eye thing now. So the idea of this and cutting off, oh man, it got me. I just wish they hadn't shown us it grow, because it just didn't look right to me. It looked kind of goofy, right?
Okay.
But she did a great job. The actress who played Marge is, like, considering she was running around with some apparatus strapped to her head, did a really good job looking just absolutely terrified.
Did you ever watch Station 11?
I haven't.
Okay, yeah, she's does an incredible job there. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the problems you did with the CGI with the eye stalks growing, but yeah, overall, I just thought that this was a really effective a really effective scare. It was really just well constructed. How the misdirect of like where we're worried about Lily, and then it's like, oh my God, no, Marge. And we at least saw that moment before it started to happen. And it's interesting, the timing of when this happened. It started to happen the moment where Marge was going to be brave and step forward and say, Lily, actually, we're playing a trick on you.
Yeah. Wow.
But
yeah.
regardless, it ends up saving Lily from the trick. But then it's worse because now Lily looks like she was. I mean, assuming that Marge is going to be like, no, she didn't actually hurt me. But it doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, but what is she going to say she was doing, right?
Right.
Marge is showing herself to be not a very good friend, right? Like,
right.
I don't know what...
She doesn't want to go to the sanatorium.
Right, yeah. I don't know that means she's going to point at Lily and say she tried to kill me with that... God, what do you call that thing?
Like a chisel or something?
Chisel, exactly. Yeah, thank you. I don't know that she's going to finger the blame in that way, but is she going to say, I actually had this whole hallucination in her head? Maybe she thinks that it's hallucination at that point with my eyes, or I don't know. Like, we'll see what happens.
Hopefully she's finally done with the patty cakes.
Yeah, that was, I don't know. Like, I was a little surprised by how far she was almost going to take that.
Right.
It's one thing to ditch your friends. I think we can all empathize with a little bit of like social ladder envy when you're an adolescent. Like, oh, if only the cool kids liked me or whatever, except for those of you in the listener that were the cool kids. If so, screw you. The rest of us were envious. They were like, I don't know, even the cool kids, that's the whole terrible thing about middle school, is that they were all secretly self-conscious and self-loathing also, right? So we can empathize with that, but I wasn't like wishing I was a cool kid and also setting up my friends to be totally punked by the cool kids. Like, that is, she did cross a line there that it's interesting to see, like, is she going to, now that she's had this experience, does she reconnect with Lily and her meet her new friends? And does she deserve to be kind of welcomed into the fold as someone on the Pennywise killing squad?
She's lost an eye. I mean, I'm willing to give her a bit of grace now. She was going to tell Lily.
She's paid. She's paid for it. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's not, we're not at King. In King novels, we have bullies that will kill a kid. So whether it's Hank Bowers in It or Keith Sutherland's character in Stand By Me, I don't remember his name, but in The Body, like you'll have a bully that will take it to extremes that I thankfully never saw a bully go to as a child. So maybe with a little lack of loyalty is kind of nothing in the Stephen King universe, and Marge is pretty forgivable relative to some of the potential that we could have with someone living in Derry.
Right. I just want to point out in this section that we also did see an ad for the duck and cover turtle that we've seen before, because never forget, this is prime Cold War time, but this does lead us into turtle talk. So the final part of the episode, the glue of the Western Wood. While Rose gently pries into the life of military wife Charlotte for insights into what the military wants in the Western Woods, General Shaw tells his soldiers to allow Taniel and his friends, who have been spying on the base, in, so that he has an excuse to arrest them. With Taniel in custody, he sends Dick Halloran in to pry into his mind to find out where they can find what they're looking for, while Shaw and Leroy watch from the other side of the glass. Roughly entering Taniel's mind, Dick witnesses a young Taniel talking to his Aunt Rose, who asks him to repeat the tale of the Galoo, the monster in the Western Wood. Young Taniel tells of a meteorite that fell to Earth millions of years ago, corrupting the area. The native people who settled there learned how to avoid the entity, leaving it to the Western Wood, where it seemed to be stuck. Learning it feared the pieces of the rocky cage in which it had landed, they shaped a shard of the space stone into a ritual dagger. However, as the white settlers came, they did not heed the locals' warnings about the Western Wood, and Pennywise fed on them, growing in strength, its territory stretching further than ever before. A single dagger was no longer enough to hold it at bay. The Shakopua warrior Sesqui says that it is time to leave their land, but her daughter Nakani does not want to go. Nakani leads a group of her friends into the Western Wood, the Galu's territory, to find the cave holding the remaining space stone that was once the Galu's cage. Nakani and her friends plan to take more of this stone and create more weapons against the Galu. When Sesqui learns what her daughter has done, she gathers a group of warriors to find them. Most are killed, but Nakani survives. When the stone is recovered, she leads her tribe in burying 13 shards around the Western Wood to cage the Galu. These are the beacons the U.S. military is now seeking. Dick questions Taniel, interrupting the vision, and Taniel tells him that he will find the tunnels to the shards under the old well. So, first of all, Dick, super creepy at the end. Like, I almost thought it was a Pennywise incarnation, the way he slow claps and then does that wicked smile.
I'm sorry, where? When?
At the
clap?
end of Taniel's vision.
Oh, yeah. He is so sinister. Why is he so sinister with that? Like, he has to know, especially after seeing the vision. Like, look, he's got a job. I get it. We could argue whether Dick should be doing this job and should be like invading this guy's mind. But does that not give you also empathy for this guy? Like, it was weird to see Dick behave kind of almost maliciously toward him. Like, this is a guy he's had a grudge for the whole story. Like, have you ever even met this young guy?
Yeah, because he at first he was like, I'm sorry, this is going to hurt, because Taniel really fights him about, getting into his head.
Impressively, I have to say. Like, I don't know how normal that is, but he fought him off, it seemed, quite well.
Yeah, you have to wonder how many of these characters do have a bit of the Shining themselves.
Right. That is something that Dick could tell us, I think, and he is not telling anybody yet, at least.
I also think it's interesting how they show Dick literally tapping into his third eye, like he's tapping his fingers against the center of his forehead, and then he does this really notable thing where he kind of like covers his whole face with his hand so that his forefinger can be right in the third eye.
It's just interesting because we don't see such a theatrical portrayal of The Shining really ever, and so it's just, are we supposed to take it to understand this is what it takes when somebody is really resisting effectively, right? Because it seems like he can kind of just in passing read people's thoughts normally. But that's not enough here, right? Does this always take such a kind of effort, or is it just because Taniel is, sort of uniquely capable, it seems, of blocking that?
Right. And is it the same in the book that the entity came to Earth millions of years ago?
I think so. I think it's a long time.
It is in the movie. It's like that. I thought it was like centuries, but anyway, yeah, it's been a long time.
I think they don't know is the truth. Right. Like, it's nobody.
So they've been there
neither
longer
do
than
the tribe doesn't know either, because they haven't been there millions of years. It's just sort of like assumed maybe to be. Now you could maybe radiocarbon date that meteorite or whatever, but it's a long time before any living memory or even historical records or oral tradition of the tribe that was living there.
Well, I'm wondering, did the entity feed on dinosaurs? Are we supposed to read something into having some influence in their demise?
Right. Yeah. Did Derry move as the plates shifted and Pangea split? Yeah. That crosses into, I don't know that we're supposed to wonder, but I mean, we see it prefers to eat children because of the salting of the fear meat. But presumably a lot of those soldiers and colonists it was eating were adults, most of them probably. So its diet can change. So does it?
It ate before humans were around. So
right. It must have eaten some but maybe not also. It's also possible that it was essentially hibernating until humans, right? We don't really know. It is some kind of an eldritch god from the Todash darkness.
Right.
as it's called in the Dark Tower, from outside of the universe, basically, the space between worlds. And it is possible that it is uniquely like predisposed to eating humans or sentient beings, and they maybe just didn't need to eat or didn't choose to eat animals, or maybe it was eating. It's not like a calorie thing. I don't think it's like, oh, I have to eat that bear now because I haven't eaten. And I feel like if you told me that it didn't eat until humans arrived, that's believable, because we don't know really the rules around this thing, and it's not operating on, the same digestion and calorie consumption and biological rules that the rest of us are operating under.
All right. So since you brought up the Todash darkness, and we get the mention of the children of Maturin is what Rose calls the group that she and Daniel are part of. Do you want to talk to us about Maturin, the turtle?
So it's actually interesting because there's a couple lore questions and feedback that maybe I don't want to ruin. I wonder if we should jump to a couple of those that are related to this and then talk, because I don't want to then respond to Danny and say, oh yeah, we already talked about that.
Yeah. So Danny, do you want to read what Danny says?
So I guess there's a few too, right? So maybe let's read can we read the it history ones kind of all as a mass and then respond to them maybe?
Okay, sure. So there was a general question. I'm not sure who first brought it up, but just what is the gender of it? Because it's mentioned that in the movies that it maybe is a female spider laying eggs or whatever. So there's questions about that. We often say he, or obviously we say it. Yeah. He, because of the Pennywise thing. Right. So that's one question. The other is Aaron asked, does Derry lie within the Western Wood, or is it just that it has more power to do its thing during the cycles and can reach Derry? And I think that this is answered by the whole feeding on the stupid white colonists who don't listen to, and it gets stronger. I think that Rose answered that.
But to clarify that, though, does it seem that, so they create these pillars that are the outer boundary. Are we to understand that modern Derry falls within the inside of those pillars?
No, because there is still woods in modern Derry, and I think that it's just escaped its boundaries. Like, so we saw they bury the meteorite pieces in, at least one is inside of a turtle shell, and then seal them with smokestacks. And it does beg the question of why did they dig up a car? I assume the car was going to be one of the beacons. Right. But apparently the meteorite shards are the beacons.
Maybe.
It begs the question, is the meteorite cage, can it be used as a weapon simply because they believe it can be, in the same way we see in the movie that, I'm thinking of the 1990 movie where...
the slingshot slug.
Well, I was going to say where Eddie turns the asthma inhaler into a weapon, just because he believes it is.
But... Okay, sorry, but and this is a legitimate question. Like, I interpreted the the pillars with the 13 pillars with the shards being extended past the woods, right? And also they say that if it weren't for those, this thing would have spread and taken over the world, right? So I don't know that it has any capacity to go beyond. And this is a little bit retconning the novel. Like, look, we don't know nobody knows anything in the novel in the movie, but like they sort of question whether Derry is it. Because they don't understand why it can't leave the area, and they sort of arrive at that it has some sort of spiritual connection to Derry that is almost inseparable, that they are sort of one and the same. And this would disrupt that in the sense that, no, there's actually a barrier. But so I feel like maybe they're telling us that this town, that let's say the Western Wood is a mile or a couple miles, that they built these pillars further out after it has expanded, and that the settlers just naively constructed the town within the boundary. That
is not my reading at all, because
interesting.
The town existed, at least in some capacity, in 1908. When it was more restricted to the wood, and the well house, the old well, that would not have been, was not in the Western Wood, and that is, we know, its home. So
on Evil Street.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that. So this happened with the shards and all that happened this isn't in 1908, right? This is a long time ago, 300 years or 200 years, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we know that the town of Derry wasn't built within that? Like, there's nothing to say that the well house is not there.
I mean, I think that what we're going to see, we know, and I can say this, it's in the opening credits. It's referenced in the old movies. The 1908 version of the story, often these stories end with a massacre, and that ends with the old ironworks explosion during an Easter egg hunt. So I think what we will see in season 3 would be 1908 is how, because we see that Rose and Shaw, when they're kids, and Rose is like, this entity is in the Western Wood. Stay away from the Western Wood. We get out of the Western Wood. It can't follow us. I think what we'll see in this season 3 is how it breaches that barrier in 1908. So this is 2 cycles later. It's out. Even.
Yeah. But why can't it go to San Diego and Timbuktu?
Because that's too far.
Why is it?
Its boundaries have grown, but not like that far.
Yeah. I wonder how much of this is going to get clarified. So, by the way, on the gender question, they sort of come to understand because Pennywise, or the creature that is spawning, potentially has eggs that they destroy in the novel, that they go, oh, it's a female. But I just wonder, like, what does female and male even mean at that point? Like, this is asexual reproduction. I don't think it mated with another it. It's been here for millions of years, right? So it maybe doesn't matter. Like, it's genderless. Pennywise adopts a male form, but Mrs. Kirsch is a female form, right? So okay. There are 2 more pieces of feedback that definitely lead us to want to talk, I think, about the turtle.
Okay.
So Posson20 says, yeah, this 27-year cycle I still don't understand. It must be in hibernation state. And by the way, do we know for how long it is active when 27 years comes around? Like, does it go underground again once its appetite is full? Josh Liu says maybe it's a space cicada. I think that one, we don't know, but it's a couple years at max of it feeding. It may even be a few months. But then more, I don't know if you have anything, because Danny has the real lore question here. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that they've made it clear it's not exactly 27 years. It's about 27 years. So it could be like 25 or 30.
Sure.
So I think that honestly, like, the real answer is because this is about the gap between a generation of parents and children, so that, it can repeat like that.
Sure.
That's the unofficial answer. The lore answer, I don't know. You might have a better idea of that than I do.
It's interesting because it's not 19, which brings me to the next lore. This is Danny. Why 13 pillars? They could have so easily made it 12 to match the spokes that hold up each end of the beams. What the heck is that? Mark says. We'll talk about that. I mean, if you're going to have 1 million turtles in every episode, 19 would have also made more sense. This is complete gibberish for non-Dark Tower people. Okay, thank you, Daniel, if we can call you that. All right, so 19 is a number of significance. If you read Stephen King, 19 is everywhere. 19 is something that matters a lot in the Dark Tower stories in a way that becomes almost meta, where it's like, why does this number matter? They sort of draw attention to the fact that this number matters and the nonsense of it and the meaningless of it. But it is a number with some power in this universe that we don't even really need to explain because it's pretty much unexplainable. But it would be interesting if this was 19 pillars or 12, as we'll talk about in a second. But also, if its cycle was 19 years, that would also be interesting. But to that, I would say the It novel predates probably 5 of the Dark Tower, if not 6 of the Dark Tower novels. So a lot of this stuff was not cooked yet in Stephen King's brain. I don't know if he's obsessed with the number 19 yet, Weird Al fans, 27 is the number in Weird Al songs, but he doesn't start that at the beginning of his songs. It comes 27 gets mentioned in later albums, so it may be similar to that with Stephen King. And don't at me if I'm wrong on that. Maybe the first Weird Al song ever has the number 27 in it. Okay, so the beams. What are we talking about here? This is, I sent you a message, Elysia, right after I watched the episode, and I said, we finally have to talk about the turtle. And the reason for this is these pillars. And I do think Danny is onto something by asking why not 12? Because if there were 12, this would be very synergistic with the rest of the Dark Tower universe. But it's not. But 13 is sort of Zodiac-ish. Well, and so the Dark Tower has sort of Zodiac-ish elements, like Super Zodiac.
In real quick
go ahead,
For the people who are, because I have read enough of the Dark Tower series to understand a bit that it becomes a plot point about the beams where they, you talked about, was it Shardik?
We'll talk about it, yeah.
But where the beams are pointing you towards something. So they find where the beams start, and then this is kind of how they start to locate the Dark Tower.
All right, I'm going to explain this in a way that doesn't spoil any important plot points in the Dark Tower or other Stephen King novels, but does spoil, like, some of this stuff I'm about to share, you don't learn until Dark Tower book 6, book 7, but it's just cosmology, right? I'm treating that in a Lorehounds podcast as everybody wants to know that. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to be mad if they finally read Song of Susanna, book 6, and they're like, oh, but Mark already told me this bit about Maturin, right? Okay. So in the Stephen King universe, mostly as expressed by the Dark Tower, but also there's probably, aside from the 7 or 8 novels that constitute the Dark Tower story, it doesn't matter why it's or 8.
Right.
There are also other novels that, like The Green Mile, for example, technically takes place in the same universe, but nothing in there really matters to the larger universe. But if we look at Insomnia or It or
we talked about Dr. Sleep,
Dr. Sleep, those novels actually very much Salem's Lot, his second novel, very much play into the larger The Stand. You learn about the larger mythology in bits and pieces. So, okay, there's a multiverse in the Stephen King universe, and there's a sort of central hub world, essentially, called Midworld. And we call it Midworld, but Midworld is also a section of the Midworld world, right? They have sort of different regions, but they kind of call the whole thing Midworld.
Right.
In the middle of Midworld, or in the world of Midworld, is something called the Dark Tower.
Which, by the way, Middle Earth much, but anyway, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Well, but it's interesting because part of what Stephen King is doing in the Dark Tower, specifically the story, is it's remixing, right? So I'm about to talk about even the name Maturin, the name of the turtle, is a literary reference, and we'll get to that in a second. But like everything, Roland is singing "Hey Jude." Roland Deschain, the protagonist, who's this like grizzled sort of gunslinger, they call him, basically like a gun-toting knight. He's like humming "Hey Jude" and stuff. Like there's weird references to our world, especially the 20th century, because the Dark Tower world, Midworld, has portals to other universes and other worlds. And so there's constant bleed. And like a mythical figure, like the most prominent of these so-called gunslingers, is a guy named Arthur Eld. And he's basically the King Arthur story, except he's got a revolver instead of a sword, right? And so there's this idea that like, okay, yeah, Stephen King is copying off of Lord of the Rings, but the Lord of the Rings probably is referred to in there's Harry Potter references in the like villainous, monstrous characters that look like Quidditch players in one of the Dark Tower books, because it's very much like our stories infect in ways that basically it gets so meta in a way I can't spoil, that in the 6th book, starting in the 6th book, it gets so meta that some people are turned off by it majorly, and Whereas I'm like, oh my God, I'm all in. I can't believe he did this. Congratulations, Stephen, you did it. And a lot of this, like just to talk life story, he almost died. So anybody who's ever been to Maine, there's these, and I've gone for runs on these streets, and there's these long roads in the middle of the woods between communities, and a car will drive by and you're like, oh my God, how did I not just get hit by that car? And sure enough, Stephen King was hit while he was on a walk and almost died. And this is in the early 2000s, and like almost died. Like I think he might have been in a coma for a brief period. He then woke up basically and said, I have to finish The Dark Tower. And he wrote 3 books within the span of a few years after really the Dark Tower novels were like 5 and 10 years apart prior to that. And at that moment, he also decided to make the most meta decisions possible. So these ideas that like, oh, it's references to The Lord of the Rings, those are not criticisms. That is a deliberate baked in thing, right?
It's a feature, not a bug. Yeah.
It's a feature, not a bug. Now, that doesn't mean it might not be for everybody. Sometimes people might find it too much, right? So, okay. So the Dark Tower is at the center of Midworld. And the Dark Tower is essentially the linchpin of existence. It is the connecting tissue of all of creation. You could possibly, in the same way that we wonder if it is Derry, the Dark Tower might be Gon. Gon is God. Gan, Gon, is so essentially the creator, the unnamed kind of not directly acting on us,
right.
God,
Eru,
right?
Yeah.
Eru or the light in the Wheel of Time, right? So we always got to bring up the Wheel of Time at least once, right?
The creator.
So,
yeah, which, by the way, the Wheel of Time talks about the creator with a capital C. It's the same way Native Americans talk about God, is the creator with a capital C.
Interesting. Yeah. So the beams. So the universe is held up. And this is where it gets to be like confusing. Like, is this metaphorical or physical? Held up by beams. So if you imagine the world, sort of also the universe, but one of the universes has a tower at the center. And this tower exists sort of on other planes of existence too. For example, the Dark Tower is represented in our world in New York City by a single rose in a building, right?
Right.
And it doesn't matter. It's not the Dark Tower, but it is the representation of that same force on Earth, right? So if you imagine that being the center of the world, and then these spokes going out, and they're called the beams, and those beams hold up the world. They hold up creation, like Atlas holding the Earth or being on the back of a turtle. But the weird thing, and here's where it gets really weird, is because it's not weird so far. Right. These might be just spiritual like threads, but they might also be actually physical, because in the backstory of the Dark Tower, which you don't ever learn much about it, it's just these sort of ancient civilization. Midworld used to be a highly technologically advanced civilization. And it's possible it's our world in the future or something like that, like a super high-tech cyborg organism kind of supercomputers, AI civilization that falls. But before they fall, they realize that the beams are weakening. And so they reinforce the beams with actual mechanical structure also. And again, this is like, you don't learn this until late in the series, but none of this matters really to the series. But we have these beams that are supporting not just Midworld, but kind of the connective tissue between the multiverse on the sort of strength of these like rafter sort of 2x4s in a building. Mm-hmm. Have I gone too far, Elysia? Are you with me?
No. Keep going.
Should I keep going? Okay. So everybody, listeners, if you need a pause, take a breather, come back. Well, we take 10-minute breaks in my long classes. So, okay, we have each of these beams on the end, and this is where this relates to what Danny was saying, has a guardian at its end, okay? And these are animal sort of totemic beings. And the question is open, like what exactly is the form of these beings? Because there is a turtle that is sort of a turtle in some way, but also kind of a demigod or a god. But also we learned that the great old ones are the people who built all the machines back thousands and thousands of years ago in the backstory of the Dark Tower, who reinforced the beams with mechanical, and they had like godlike control of technology. But But also, like when you meet a demon in the Dark Tower, it could be a monster, but it could also be a machine that's gone crazy, right? And you never kind of know. You have to read a passage twice to realize, oh, that thing had an antenna on it. That wasn't just a ghost or whatever. That was a robot that's gone insane that they just shot. So,
remind me, because, so this is very early in the Dark Tower series where they meet this bear, Shardik. And
Shardik, yep.
Shardik is not in good shape, and they end up taking Shardik out. Minor spoiler for the beginning of this series. What's Shardik? Remind me, was Shardik actually a mechanical, that version that they ran into, the bear?
So here's the deal. So we have at the end of each of these beams, there's 6 beams, but 12 possible destination points. At the end of each beam is a portal to another world, by the way. We know that the portal at where Shardik the bear is leads to New York City in our world, or at least a version of Earth, right?
Right.
So we don't know what's at the other portals, but each of these has a guardian at it. And we think that these are these metaphysical avatar kind of godlike animal forces. But here's the weird thing. As the great old ones, the sort of super tech advanced civilization thousands of years ago, recognized the vulnerability of the Dark Tower and the beams. They thought they were weakening. They reinforced them biomechanically, and that includes turning some of the, I think it must have been that some of the guardian creatures were weakening also. And so they built a giant mechanical bear. So the guardian, the bear, in the timeline of the Dark Tower, when they encounter it, was not a god bear anymore. Maybe it inhabited a robotic bear, but it's basically a robot. And it's been so many thousands of years that its programming has got all messed up, and it is mad and it attacks them. And it's just this giant mechanical, but possibly biomechanical bear. And so it's unclear, is this the original bear with cybernetic enhancements kind of? They don't know. And Roland is interesting because it takes a few books. Book
Roland
4
being
is
the main gunslinger.
The gunslinger, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the main character, but he has what's called a quartet, which is he has a losers club of other buddies, and they are way more compelling characters.
Yeah,
they're adults. Yeah. Well, one of them is a kid.
That's true.
And one of them is a cute, like dog-like creature, which you maybe haven't met yet.
No, I have. That happens, I think, in like book 3 or 4. Anyway.
Yeah. So, but book 4 is a massive backstory of Roland as a young man. And that is the first time Roland has any, to me, you start to actually feel for him, because earlier it's like they fight this bear and he kind of is almost uninterested by the implications of this. Why was this thing a machine? Whereas the other people he's with are like, what is going on here? Roland takes so much of this just for given. But anyways, where am I going with this? So there are guardians. There are 12 guardians, not 13, but 12. If we go clockwise, these are at the ends of the earth in Midworld. We go elephant, rat, bat, eagle, dog, turtle, wolf, fish, hare, lion, horse, and bear. And every beam has its opposite. So the bear and the turtle exist on the same beam. And the way they actually kind of use it to tell direction in Midworld. Like if you're moving towards or away from the tower, you would say, for example, I am on the path, or I am on the beam of the bear on the path of the turtle. And what that would mean, as I recall, is that you're heading towards the Dark Tower, pointed at the turtle. You're on because
basically
away from
the bear. Yeah.
Walking away from the bear, because the bear and the turtle are kind of on the same beam, but they call it the
Opposite
beam
ends.
of the turtle if you're on that side. But they say you're on the path of the bear or the path of the turtle. So the bear and the turtle are kind of the only, we don't learn about the eagle. The lion is called Aslan. These all are literary references. Literally Aslan from Narnia. They're all references. So Shardik is from some novel about a bear. I don't remember what it is. But Stephen Maturin is a character in the Patrick O'Brian, the Master and Commander novels. I don't know. I haven't read those. I haven't seen that film.
Shardik is the sequel to Watership Down.
Seriously? And
some
it's a
people
bear?
might know. Yeah.
Okay, and it's about a bear. So and then you have to wonder, are these just Stephen King being cute, or are these Dark Tower pop culture eating itself, and we're getting Harry Potter references in the actual story as characters, right? Both can be true. But Stephen Maturin is a character from the Patrick O'Brian novels who is apparently like names a species of tortoise or something like that.
Okay.
So the turtle is one of these guardians that, for whatever reason, is associated with the earth and protecting the earth. It's possible if we read into that the turtle has a portal that leads to the earth. In the Dark Tower, they're nowhere near that side of the world.
I mentioned this before, but in a lot of Native American culture, including what they based this fictional culture in the show on and the movies, is that Turtle Island is the name for North America because, we as humans, we live on the back of a turtle, and they're drawing that connection. This is an addition because Stephen King in his books, he would like make these vague reference to, these ancient burial grounds and Native American concepts, but without really having the understanding. So I do think that it's a good thing they're going in and deepening this connection.
Sure.
So that is this addition of the TV show is drawing more connections with this turtle entity.
But that's also the idea that the earth rests on the back of the turtle with a capital T, is a thing that is true also in the Stephen King universe.
Right.
And so it's a confusing thing because the turtle is really just one of 12 of these guardians, and they're not the god, but they're like kind of like gods that exist primordially. And I think we're supposed to think like,
it's tied to Hinduism too. So there's a lot of, this is one of our kind of concepts in humanity.
Sure.
For some reason.
In the same way that you can think of the Maiar for the Tolkien fans as like Sauron and Gandalf are actually equivalent cosmically powerful, it may be that it's postulated that it and the turtle might be of equivalent strength. So we think of like that level. So they're not God, but they within a certain confines have almost unlimited power. But it seems to be both true that the turtle is one of these 12 guardians, which maybe is biomechanical in actual midworld, or maybe not, but also might be holding up the earth itself metaphysically. So does that mean that that's just a legend and no one knows that that's true? Does that mean that the turtle is uniquely kind of aligned with our world, whereas the eagle might be, some other form of existence that it kind of has chosen? And so there's in some way the turtle is not the opposite of it, because the opposite of the turtle is the bear, literally, across the beam.
Depends what we mean by opposite, yeah.
Right, but the bear and the turtle are probably on the same side if the bear hadn't gone mad as a machine. But the turtle seems to be diametrically the antagonist of Pennywise. But the turtle's agency and actions in the book are really subtle. And you'd have to remind me because I haven't read it for so long, and this stuff's all cut from the films,
recent movies,
yeah. But just without spoiling too much, there are moments where the kids kind of commune with the turtle, and it's almost, you wonder if it's real because the turtle's kind of a bro. If I remember, the turtle's like, "Hey man, keep it going. Like, you got this, buddy." Like that kind of you're like, what? That's what this cosmic unimaginable force is saying.
Maybe that's like through their filter of how they understand it.
But is it even happening, right? Like, because the kids know none of what I just described. All this cosmology of what's really going on is nobody on Earth knows any of it, right? But there's this moment in the second half of the novel where they're adults, where someone might evoke the turtle to Pennywise, because the interaction that I described, the like hallucinated conversation with the turtle, happens as they're kids. And Pennywise says that the turtle is dead. The turtle choked on a galaxy. And so is that true? Right. Yeah. We don't know, because the turtle does not come up much in the turtle is mentioned as a guardian, but the Dark Tower, they don't directly mess with the turtle much. Did the turtle die? Because the part of the plot of the Dark Tower is like what happens as these beams weaken, right? And what are they, without spoiling it, like what do we do if forces are maybe deliberately trying to break the beams, and what would that do to existence, right? Could it be that the turtle died, right? So I know that was a huge info dump, but Danny's question, why isn't this 12, is fascinating because the way they visually represent this is very much like spokes surrounding 13 spokes, kind of. It's so easy for these to be beams, and it might still be that way. And
Don't
the
they say
Zodiac has
beams at one
12.
point?
Do they say beams?
Didn't they say, or no, maybe they didn't
pillars.
say beams. Maybe they said totems or something.
Definitely pillars. And like the Zodiac is 12. We clearly have a Zodiac reference going on.
Right.
But there's also versions of the Zodiac, aren't there, with 13?
Yeah.
And so, is there a 13th guardian in the cosmology we don't know about that's being represented here? It's not 19. 19 would have been this other weird Dark Tower reference. But they can't, in a story that's dropping so much turtle, it's not like they don't know about the beams, right?
Right.
They know about all that stuff. They're choosing to refer to this visual. Like there's a moment in the Dark Tower where Roland explains this to the rest of the quartet, and he just takes a stick and he draws a circle on the dirt and draws the lines cutting through and says, this is existence and this is the beams. And he doesn't explain enough for my taste at that point in the story, but they have to learn it all later. But they showed us that, right? And it's not exactly that. It was 13. So I don't know. Elysia,
lots of questions.
It's all out. What are we thinking before we move on?
Well, I think I want to bring in the last piece of feedback here too, since we're talking Dark Tower. Reader Reborn says, is it more powerful in Derry? Okay, the first part is just general it lore, and then the second part's about the Dark Tower. Is it more powerful in Derry than in the movies? It just seems it can do more in the show. And he referenced, which you've brought up before about the whole car scare in the first episode, how that's a lot of thing to be several people in a car and stuff. Like manifest as a fool. That just seems beyond
Maybe
the capabilities
too
of
far,
it.
yeah.
My theory is that it is more powerful and that each cycle of losers has weakened it just a little bit more until it gets to the point where the final losers can finally defeat it. So maybe it's
totally
at its
possible.
peak power in 1908. And then, I think that's an interesting theory. I'll be curious to see if we see the entity getting more powerful as we go back in these seasons of this show, assuming we're going to get more seasons, which I think is going to happen. I think people are liking the show. I think it's doing well.
Hopefully, yeah. We do have to, can I just comment on that? We also have to, I think that's a fascinating question. Is it gaining or weakening in strength? In this story about the Galoo, we see it seems to be increasing in strength the more it feeds, right? But does each loser generation, chip a piece of that armor? We do have to remember that for all of Pennywise's powers that possibly are godlike, but within a confine in the same way that the turtle might have godlike powers that are limited, for whatever reason, one of its rules is that it does take on the weakness of the form. So, Pennywise is kind of just a corporeal clown. Like maybe a gun to the head would kill Pennywise. We don't know that, maybe, but it is susceptible to some extent by the choices it makes. And so maybe the final, if we could say that the losers in the 2017 timeline kill it for once and for all, which maybe is not true. We don't really know. It could be that it was weakened sufficiently by previous generations, or it could be that they just kind of managed to overcome its weakness in that particular form. And Pennywise doesn't occur in other novels in a very prominent way, but there is, I won't spoil where and what, but there is a creature that occurs in another Stephen King work that people often wonder, is this the same as it in terms of this species? And that creature is very much taken out and pretty quickly. And it's very powerful.
What creature is it? From what book?
It would be look, okay,
Okay.
it's not, there's a creature that is very, very powerful that occurs in the Dark Tower series that
Okay.
feeds off of fear in the same way.
Okay.
Right. And we don't know the limits of, because this character is not, the Dark Tower story is quite episodic in some ways. Not Monster of the Week episodic, but like they're just journeying towards the tower, and the closer they get, the weirder stuff gets. And there is a creature that is referred to and is discussed that people wonder, is this the same kind of creature as Pennywise because of this whole feeding off of fear element? But that creature is killable, and that creature might be killable because of the form it's choosing to take when it is encountered. And I don't want to spoil much, but
no, that's
but
fair.
it's possible that Reader Reborn is really onto something about the generational damage it's getting done, but it also just might be, you know, if it took the form of something that has a weakness and someone believes in that weakness, it is risking its life in that moment.
Right.
In the same way that the turtle risked its life when it choked on a galaxy, apparently.
Right, apparently. All right. So Reader Reborn tying into the Dark Tower ends with, I have a tinfoil hat question for Tower Junkies based on the podcast discussion last week. The Losers Club, analogous adults seem quote unquote good compared to most everyone else. Does Pennywise create gunslingers?
Create them by
I
creating
suppose,
the stress scenario?
yeah,
What do you
making them become more heroic because they're forced to overcome Pennywise?
Are the kids gunslingers? That's interesting because like a gunslinger in the King universe comes to mean a sort of a knight of justice, right? And you get one of the cringiest. Stephen King is a like liberal boomer, like classic, like there's an entire novel about someone trying to save JFK. And there's a character in the Dark Tower who was alive in that era, because there are some characters from Earth in the Dark Tower, because it's a multiversal, who says, JFK, he was the real gunslinger. And you're like, I really like, okay, Stephen, I get it. Love you some JFK. So gunslinger comes to mean kind of a knight of goods, so to speak. And the gunslingers in the Dark Tower, the quartet, because in the backstory of the Dark Tower, the gunslingers are like they have lost. They used to kind of be like in charge, so to speak, like their civilization a long time ago kind of ran things. And they're kind of all gone, except for a few of them, including Roland, the main character. But new ones are created, and they're created out of need. And some of them aren't even from Midworld. Some of them are from Earth and things like that. And there are people who are taken from really, and this isn't spoiling much, this is early stuff. You know, there's a kid who is in distress. There's a woman who loses her legs due to a horrifying accident that's actually like a racist attack and things like that. Like these people become gunslingers, and they become, in the Dark Tower, they become literal gunslingers, where they become crazy aces with guns, like to the point that they can, you know, it's almost video gamey in the sense that like you shoot the monster enough, it's gonna die. Is a little more Dark Tower, a little more fantasy battle sequences more than it is all metaphysical with kids and their love for each other can fight the darkness, kind of what we get here. So figuratively, Pennywise 100% creates gunslingers, possibly literally, but these kids would need to, you know, if Will at the end of the story finds a portal and walks to Midworld and sees a grizzled cowboy, he's about to become a gunslinger probably. But there's like capital G gunslinger and then lowercase g. If JFK is a gunslinger, well then Rich and Lily are gunslingers. But if you need to go to Midworld and actually learn how to shoot, maybe not.
Right. Okay, that's fair. All right.
We'll see. We'll watch that.
Yeah, good. Reader Reborn, good show. Jumping back into the end of the episode quickly to wrap this up. So I do find with the, you know, in terms of Pennywise and I'm calling the entity Pennywise, also Yellow Eyes sometimes, but Pennywise technically is the clown shape. I'm being more general about it because that's a name people know. But let's say, so Pennywise we see always appears as the fears of the people. So it's very interesting that it's appearing as to the Native Americans. First, as a giant moose shedding its antler skin, which is like, yeah, that's really what mooses look like. Meese look like when
Mice.
when they shed their antler skin. It's like this bloody mess like that. It is horrifying. So I can imagine somebody saw that, and was terrified by it as a kid. But the other things that it appears as to the Native American group is white settlers and Christian
Friar
priests.
Tuck looking guy.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With a sort of demon baby birthed from the monster's chest, which has a crown of thorns on it. Like, okay, which...
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't even notice that. Subtle are you guys? Subtle. Wow.
Subtle. So it is... It is interesting, the way, I love this story, as I always say, as an analogy, and they're leading into this here where, the time to leave their land, quote unquote, because the white settlers have come and they've disturbed the balance of nature. That's all real, straight out of history. Maybe not with a supernatural entity from space, but this is all based on real stuff. Like, for example, an example that we see today of the colonists not listening to the local tribes and messing things up is the fires in California. The tribes that have lived there for thousands of years, they learned methods of controlled burning in order to prevent these fires from happening. But then, when the Europeans came, they're like, no, we're not setting things on fire to prevent fires. That's stupid. And now we see the fallout of that, and they're actually starting to go back. They're like, wait a minute. Are there still people alive who knew how this controlled burning thing worked? Because I think we need to try that now. So, yeah, it is very much reflecting reality.
Are we going to get into a big conversation about the abundance model of progressive politics in reshaping environmental law to we're not? I thought we were going to get into that. Okay, all right, yeah.
No, just pointing out the
fascinating. Yeah, it's a good example.
And just want to point out also from the lore perspective, we see these 3 lights above these entities that they're seeing in the woods, and that seems to be how they represent what's called the deadlights. So I think we're going to hold off on talking about the deadlights because based on trailers, I think we're going to have good reason to talk about the deadlights more very soon.
Interesting, they're not orange. I thought they were orange in the previous depictions from the novels. Am I wrong? Or not the novels, the films?
In the films, it's like the 3 white lights, but then
it's
we
white.
see the yellow eyes.
Never mind.
Yeah.
I think I'm just remembering the eyes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure the lore, we did enough lore diving in this. We don't need to.
No, we're going to talk about the deadlights more, but just like those 3 white lights that appear, watch out for that because you're certainly going to see more of that. And definitely you might remember it from the movies as well. Shaw, by the way, we had given General Shaw the benefit of the doubt. I'm walking that back a bit after seeing how he's treating Taniel. I don't know that I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's just, there's something off. There's just something
It's not just
off.
that, though. Before, when they're talking about, there's some scene, who's he talking to? His colonel, maybe? Where he's talking about Rose just like, oh, yeah, well, next thing we're going to get is going to be more than a cease and desist. He's talking about her very transactionally, like she's this obstacle. Like, I think we were both maybe wondering last episode, like, is he earnestly, like, how much affection does he still have for her? Mm-hmm. He's talking about her and her nephew very much like an obstacle that needs to be overcame. And so, gross, right? To what extent he still really does remember his youth. He's forsaking their bond, at least when discussing with his colleagues, at least. What's in his heart, I don't know. But the way that he treats Taniel, the way that he discusses the tribe in general, it's not a good sign, put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the question is, Leroy is witnessing all this, and Leroy's the character I have the most question marks about in this episode, just because he's struggling. You can see he's struggling about not knowing how to handle what's going on with his wife, because obviously he doesn't want bad things to happen to Hank Grogan, but he also doesn't want bad things to happen to his family. And this whole, he wants to be promoted in the military. He has this unique chance to be a part of this major important project, but now it maybe also might be linked to something that's threatening his kid. And
totally.
So a lot of question marks about what now that Leroy, he looked horrified, suitably horrified by what was going on with Daniel and the whole kind of, assaulting his mind thing that Shaw was having Dick do. So the question is, where does Leroy go next? Does
Right.
he zig or does he zag after
And
what he
why?
witnessed?
Why does Shaw bring Leroy in? Leroy basically asks for more information. Like, what are we really doing? And the answer is, come watch us mentally assault this young guy.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't just answer his question. He brings him into the fold and all the like darkness that implies. And like, that's a really interesting calculated risk that Shaw basically thinks he trusts, I guess, Leroy enough to bring him in on the, less savory aspects of what they're doing. And maybe that's going to come back to haunt him. Maybe I'm misunderstanding Shaw's angle there, but Shaw showed us his true colors in a way, but also showed Leroy. And for a guy who you need on your side, because he's this super powered, fearless man, like, that's a risky play. He could have answered his questions without kind of showing them the maliciousness and the kind of gross tactics that they're willing to, he lost his moral high ground, so to speak, with one of his officers under his command.
And maybe he's trying to either test Leroy or implicate him more, drag him in so he feels.
It's an excellent point. Totally.
But yeah, the answer that Dick gets from Daniel at the end of this is follow the tunnels under the old well and you'll find the pillars. And next week's episode title is Nebolt Street. And so the old well is also known as the Old Well House, also known as the house on Nebolt Street. So, and this is the haunted house that we see in the movies, where it is sort of its central lair in Derry.
This poor house, like they show it already looks like trash.
Yeah.
And it looks like trash in the 80s, and it looks like trash in the...
Well, I was like, is that a flash forward?
Yeah. Like, did anybody ever live in this house? Like, who...
Because wasn't it... Yeah. In the movies, in the new movies, Mike talks about the fire that killed his parents, and I thought it was supposed to be in that house. So I wondered if they were showing us in this show a flash forward of the house, of what it looked like, in the later storylines, just to remind us, like, hey, movie watchers, we're talking about this house. Because also Daniel refers to it as the old well and not the house or whatever. So maybe it really is just... It hasn't been built out yet even, or I don't know.
That would have to make sense, because if it's already dilapidated, like, look, I'm not a native New Englander, but I can tell you, living here long enough, like, if you lived in central Maine and you just didn't repair, and nobody took care of a roof, like, that house would be practically rubble by the time we get to the 1980s, right?
Right.
Someone has to own it. Someone has to have repaired it, lived there. Like, if it's just this hell house now, that's confusing. And that maybe there's an explanation. Maybe there's a unsuspecting family that'll move in and refurbish the place, and then it dilapidates again. And this is its own cycle. But if it is just as gross as it is in the It book, that's confusing. So, and even the films. And maybe it is just a well, but they clearly were showing us, like, hey, remember this from the movie?
Right.
Wink and a nod, way less subtle than a wink and a nod, really.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
And they're calling out the name, if it's called Nebolt Street, the next episode. Speaking of title, what the heck on this one? Like, they say that term, the swirling earth, what was it?
The great swirling apparatus of our planet's function, which, I expected
during the
more.
video.
I expected, like, we got the great lore drop at the end. But I expected there to be I thought it was going to be like Will and Daniel talking to each other. I don't know, talking about like science and mythology and how they interact.
Right.
And that's not quite what we got yet.
Not quite. Not yet.
Yeah.
Well put. Not yet. It's an interesting title. Like, that comes from the snail video, right? So they haven't connected those things yet, but, those connections can be made.
Yeah. All right. Well, lots of interesting things to pop up next week. So we will be back in your ear holes then. In the meantime, check out our main Lorehounds feed for weekly coverage of Pluribus. That's with Nicole, Mark's podcasting partner, and hosted by David, who is also hosting our resident historian, Brian, on a series responding to the new Ken Burns series of documentaries about the American Revolution. So you'll find all that in the main feed. You can listen along, watch along at your own pace if any of that interests you. And watch out also for a few movie episodes coming up. We've got Predator Badlands this weekend, Frankenstein next week, and then Wicked the first week in December. Mark, do you want to tell us what is going on this week on Nevermind the Music?
Thank you. Yeah. So regular old episode this week, Nicole and I talking about the Chainsmokers' Don't Let Me Down. So this might be our first EDM hit that we've done. We've done some dance music and some synthy stuff, but like this is 2010s EDM. So we lots of fun conversation about tech bros making music and stuff like that. And cognitive distortions is Nicole's angle. And I did not think we were going to talk about that when I heard a catchy groove and wrote an episode outline about it. So yeah, check us out. Episode drops on Tuesday. And next week we've got what do we have next? Oh, no special guest next week. We have a holiday themed episode next week. So check us out. Holiday music. But our own style. Right? It's Thanksgiving, yeah. And Thanksgiving's already too late to talk about Christmas music, right? So that episode drops next week. But check us out for the Chainsmokers this week.
All right, great. You'll find the link to Nevermind the Music in the link tree in the show notes, where you also find links to the other affiliates on the network. Properly Howard is between seasons. Radioactive Ramblings, I think they're going to be starting up. We have Fallout Season 2 coming up very shortly. We'll Shift Dust. There's still Dune stuff coming, I promise. But we are going to be starting our the Christmas Carol series for this year again, and the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast covering the High Republic at this point. If you're ready to go a little bit deeper down the Lorehounds rabbit hole, then you can support our Supercast or Patreon feed. They are the same content on both feeds, and that's really what makes this whole podcasting thing possible at all. So we really appreciate those who do. We're going to shout you out in a second. But Supercast and Patreon subscribers get ad-free access to all of the episodes, plus a bunch of extra episodes. Like this is Robert Redford Film Festival month. There's some What You Watchins, like the Jaws play. It talks about film festivals that I've gone to. We often have extra episodes for stuff that we're covering, things like that. So that's what you can find in the Supercast and Patreon feeds. But if that's not for you, no problem. We really appreciate you listening. We would love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about the show and our coverage. You can send that to horror@thelorehounds.com. You'll find that linked in the show notes. And you can also hop into our Discord. You'll find an invite in the link tree. And we have chats per episode of It, Welcome to Derry, as well as Pluribus and basically everything else that we're covering. So come talk to us about it there. And we want to shout out a special thank you to our Discord server boosters: Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Duve71, Athena Agelea, Lestu, Nancy M, Ghost Partition, Radioactive Richard, and Adrian. And thank you especially to our lore masters, our highest tier of subscribers: Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, SC, Peter OH, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Nathan T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dali V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Listu, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, Ben B, Scott F, Stephen N, Julia F, Collie S, Ilmariel, Paul K, Rocky Zim, Jessica H, Red Zippy, the TCS, Dopamini, Catch It, Ellen R, and always last, Adrian. All right. Thank you so much, Mark, for the lore dump this week. If people have questions about it's so complicated, it's so obscure, I'm sure there are questions. Please write them in. You can send it to horror@thelorehounds.com. You'll find that link in the show notes. And look forward to talking to you more next week, Mark. Hopefully.
For sure.
With John, we're going to find him in the tunnels. Thank you all so much and see you next week. Thank you for listening to It's Welcome to Derry, a Lorehounds podcast. Please send any questions and feedback to horror@thelorehounds.com and check out our Supercast and Patreon feeds for ad-free access and bonus episodes. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thank you for joining us. We all float down here.